بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. MashaAllah, a lot of boys joining us today, huh? I think people still are not adapting to this 2:45 starting time. That's khair, inshallah. We'll get started either way because, as usual, there's a lot of content to cover and not as much time to cover all of it in a lot of details. And plus, I have to use this. I don't know. I think it's working, right? Yeah, okay. So yeah, that other mic, which is a stronger mic, disappeared. So we have to stick with this one for now. So either way, let's just jump right into it. There are a couple announcements I want to make, but I'll leave them until probably around 3 o'clock where people will actually start showing up. So as usual, we will start off with the questions of the homework questions, sorry. So I guess the boys are gonna really participate this time. How do we respond to someone who says that the Quran affirms more than one creator because Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, glorified as Allah, the best of creators? How do we respond to this kind of allegation? When Allah Azza wa Jalla says, Tabarakallahu ahsanul khaliqin. I really need someone to participate here. Yes. Uh-huh. Jazakumullah khairan. That's exactly correct. Very simple. So yes, human beings, they create things. Okay, this masjid is created from certain materials, and those materials are built from certain materials. So this masjid is built out of bricks. Bricks are made out of cement and all of these different materials, right? But the creation of man is not the same as the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, because mankind, they require things in order to create other things. You need something to start with in order for you to create something else. However, Allah Azza wa Jal is the only creator who can create something out of nothing simply by saying kun fayakun. He simply says for it to be and it shall be. Name 3 examples. How does Allah manage the affair of His creation? So basically, give me 3 examples of, what does Allah do as a Rabb? What are 3 ways? This is like the easiest question in the world. You can literally mention any 3 things. What does the Rabb do? Huh? Nobody else knows? Yes? Okay, very good. So we mentioned that the Rabb, remember, so the definition of the Rabb is the caretaker, the one who is doing the tarbiyah, the one who creates, the one who has authority. Remember, Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah, we mentioned 3 things. We mentioned the creation of Allah Azza wa Jalla, His ability to create, and His authority over His creation, right? So we mentioned this, and His control, of course. So these are 3 examples, but there are literally infinitely many examples, okay? So Allah Azza wa Jal, since He is the creator, and He is the one who has control, He is the one who created everything in the first place. Therefore, He is also the one who can take away everything as well. He is the one who granted you your life, and He is the one who is able to take away your life. He is the one who allows food to grow and water to come pouring down from the sky. And He is similarly also the one who is able to prevent food from going and cause droughts and cause things like this. And He is also the one who is able to cause benefit, and He's also the one who is able to prevent harm. MashaAllah, lots of very interesting. Okay. And what did the Quran and the Sunnah say about the status of the Sahaba? Any boys want to participate? What does the Quran or the Sunnah say about the status of the Sahaba? Again, this is not a trick question. Yes? So very respectable, very high. So that's correct. I mean, that's a given. We mentioned that the Quran says, for example, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ, that Allah Azza wa Jal is pleased with them And they are pleased with Allah Azza wa Jal, meaning they've done everything to please Allah Azza wa Jal. And so Allah Azza wa Jal is pleased with them. And this in itself is a very high praise that Allah gives the Sahaba in the Quran. And that should be sufficient for us to understand the status of the Sahaba, that they are not to be looked down upon or to be casually mentioned or joked about. This is not allowed. This can also amount to kufr, as we mentioned this in the hadith last week. So the Sahaba to us are like role models. Just like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is our role model, we also see Sahabas are as our role models in terms of their manners, interactions, their courage, their bravery, whether they are male or female Sahabas, right? Like sometimes, as as ladies, you might hear certain things about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but when you hear certain things about a Sayyidah Khadija or a Sayyidah Aisha, you find sometimes that she is more relatable to you. And so you will look up to her as a role model. And you're like, I want to become like her. And I want to have the same actions and manners and qualities as her and dress in the same way as her and, and so on and so forth. So the status of a Sahaba, as our friend mentioned, is a very high status. And as the hadith mentioned last week, it says, do not insult my companions. So that clearly shows Prophet Muhammad ﷺ really highly regards his companions. Every single one of them. Regardless of whether there's someone like Abu Bakr as-Siddiq or whether there's someone who's not very well known and probably maybe only mentioned once in a hadith and never again. The fact that they are labeled as Sahaba, that in itself is plenty enough. So we should always, so again, the reason we're bringing this up is that whenever they are brought up in conversations and such, we have to be very careful what is said about them. And I guess, as I mentioned last week, people find it usually easy to have respect for Allah Azza wa Jal and for Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But when it comes to matters of the Sahaba, they go, it's not really that important. And people, it's almost like they undermine their status. So this is not appropriate, and we should be giving them their appropriate status. And we also talked a little bit about their sacrifice. So how, when someone tells you, for example, how is it fair? Like, remember last week the hadith we mentioned that if a person were to spend an entire mountain of Uhud in sadaqah, that's not going to amount to even a handful of coins that a Sahabi gives in sadaqah. So how is this fair? How much did the Sahaba sacrifice? Any other person from the girls want to give that a try? No? Okay, go ahead. Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair. Very good. Keep in mind, the Sahaba are literally the earliest people to accept Islam. Like literally. Like meaning, when we now go through the Seerah, and we're telling you the Sahaba did this and that, Bilal is being tortured like this, the Sahaba are being treated like this, and this happened, right? When we say these things about the Sahaba, keep in mind, these are the only Muslims in the entire world. Therefore, every action that they do has a lot of significance. When one person converts into Islam, that's a huge achievement. Okay? Today we have millions and millions of Muslims. So if one person converts, alhamdulillah, that's something to be celebrated. But it does not even begin to compare at the time of the Sahaba when there were only however many, 60, 70 Sahaba, and then then a new person joins. That's like equivalent to maybe even more than a million people converting today. So because they came at they were the first people to receive the message of Islam. They were the first to accept it. They were the first to defend it. And we're going to get to this, by the way, in the Battle of Badr. That's why Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he even said and made dua to Allah that, oh Allah, if we get defeated here, there's nobody going to be, there's no Muslims left on earth. Nobody's going to worship you. So that's why it's their accomplishments and their experiences and their times of victory and their times of defeat and happiness and sadness are of so much significance. And so they went through a lot such that fast forward 1,400 years later, we have Islam here in Calgary. And we have Islam, and we will be sitting in the Southwest Masjid basement discussing the Sahaba and Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and their status, right? So because of all of the sacrifices that they came with. When did Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj take place? Yes? Right after the year of sorrow. Very, very good. So we mentioned last week, we don't actually have an exact date, okay? And this is usually problematic. Nowadays, in Islamic calendars, if you were to open the Islamic calendar, in a lot of places actually, you will find the 27th of Rajab, that's labeled as the anniversary of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. However, if you were to read through the different books, you will find that this is it's impossible to extract such a date. We don't even know the month. How can you know the exact date? So we only know for sure it happened after the death of Khadija radiallahu anha, okay? And it happened before the Hijrah. So it was something that happened in Mecca, and it happened according to the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. She says that Salah became obligatory after the death of Khadija radiallahu anha. Who were the prophets? Who were the prophets that Prophet Muhammad saw as he ascended up in the heavens? Yes. Musa. Who else? Adam. Very good. Yusuf. Very good. Ibrahim. Very good. You don't know anyway, just give up. Well, that's good enough. That's good enough, inshallah. So we mentioned there's Adam alayhi salam in the first heaven, there's Yahya and Isa alayhi salam, there's Yusuf alayhi salam, Idris alayhi salam, Harun, the brother of Musa alayhi salam, and then Musa himself alayhi salam, and Ibrahim, right? So, are there any questions about anything before we actually dive into the new stuff? Okay. So now that alhamdulillah we have a few more people, now I can actually make the announcement. So first of all, in terms of the lecture time, there are no plans to change the time. Daylight savings is about to kick in, but the lecture time will inshallah remain from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Bismillah, okay? And we're still going to start at 2:45. So for those of you who are just walking in, I know you're walking in at 2:58, and that's before 3 p.m., but you're actually late. The lecture starts at 2:45. So that's just because there are other programs that start right after us, and I just want that extra bit of time so that we can finish up and we don't have to rush. The second announcement is about next week, inshallah. So next week, we'll actually be having a review session. Okay? And those of us who have been with us for a long time know what review sessions are. They are in the form of kahoots. So we will be having, inshallah, kahoots starting from next week. We split up into different teams, and then people sit together, and we'll have questions up on the screen. We're going to be reviewing everything that we learned. So I encourage you throughout the next week, you can revisit the older lectures, you can review the recordings, and prepare yourself so that, inshallah, you can win prizes next week if you are the winners of the kahoots. So, moving into the Aqeedah, so we're continuing Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah. So we mentioned what is Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah. We defined it. We mentioned the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, the control and the authority of Allah Azza wa Jal, and we explained all of these points in a lot of details. There is, however, one more point that needs to be mentioned about Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah, and that is Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah in itself is not enough to make a person a Muslim. Now, what does this mean? Now, it's important to understand. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, you acknowledge that Allah Azza wa Jalla, and only Allah is the one who created everything. And only Allah has full control of everything in this dunya and this world, and also in the day of judgment. And to believe that only Allah Azza wa Jalla has complete control over everything in this universe. This is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, as you know, in a nutshell, right? However, and this, believing in this should increase your iman. Believing in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah as Muslims by itself is enough to make us want to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. Because you now understand that Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator. And He is the one who provides everything for you. Right? So now you want to thank Allah Azza wa Jal. Now it should motivate you to worship Allah Azza wa Jal and to be sincere in your worship and to come closer. And we're going to mention these points in a second. However, only believing in Tawhid Al-Rububiyah is not enough. Why? Because it must be that Tawheed includes the fact that all of your actions of worship are directed towards Allah Azza wa Jal sincerely. And in fact, we find, and this is found in the Quran in several places, and also in the Seerah, and in other places, that there are even non-Muslims that believe technically in Tawhid al-Rububiyyah. The Quraysh believed in Tawhid al-Rububiyyah. Even Iblis, Shaitan, believes in Tawhid al-Rububiyyah. And we find this throughout actually several verses in the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla, for example, says in Surah Luqman, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ أو مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you were to ask them, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you were to ask the Quraysh, who created the heavens and the earth, they will tell you Allah. They will not tell you these idols, they will tell you Allah. This is Tawhid al-Rububiyyah. In another verse, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ, who created you? They will respond, Allah. In another verse, وَلَئِن سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضَ وَسَخَّرَ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ, who is the one who created the heavens and the earth and created the sun and the moon and created all of these other creations? They will say, Allah. However, does that make Quraysh Muslim? At least when they were idol worshippers? No, because they were idol worshippers. Because they had partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. They would say that Allah, yes, we acknowledge that Allah created everything, but this idol will grant us this idol will grant us rain. This idol will grant us power. This idol will grant us this. This idol will grant us that. So therefore, even though they believe in the Tawheed of Ar-Rububiyah, they still miss the other categories of Tawheed. And so this is why Tawheed Ar-Rububiyah by itself is not sufficient to make somebody a Muslim. And similarly, other verses in the Quran as well, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, قُلْ مَنْ بِيَدِهِ مَلَكُوتُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. If you were to ask them, who is the one who has the malakut, the control, the authority over everything? وَهُوَ يُجِيرُ وَلَا يُجَارُ عَلَيْهِ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ إِن كُنتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ سَيَقُولُونَ لِلَّهِ. They will say Allah Azza wa Jal. So again, they acknowledge Allah's authority. Shaitan himself, when the famous incident that happened up in the heavens, when Adam was expelled from the Jannah, when Shaitan was expelled from the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? What did Shaitan respond? This is in the Quran. He says, قَالَ رَبِّي بِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. So he's speaking to Allah Azza wa Jal, and what is he saying? My Rabb, oh my Rabb, because you caused me to go astray. So the point here is he is addressing Allah Azza wa Jal as my Rabb. So that's Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, isn't it? Iblis does not say Rabb to any other entity. However, do you think that makes Iblis a Muslim? Do you think that makes Shaitan a Muslim and a good believer? Absolutely not. Because Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, in order for Islam to enter a person's heart, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, yes, this should be there, but there should be action as well. There should be acts of worship, acts of devotion, where you direct your acts of worship towards Allah Azza wa Jal. And there are, there's even a comment from Ibn al-Qayyim radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah. He mentions also in his book, he says, basically, Tawheed is not simply saying that there is no creator except Allah Azza wa Jal. That's Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. But that's not, in itself, is not enough, because, as we mentioned, Quraysh and idol worshippers, they believed in this, because, and therefore it doesn't make sense to say that Quraysh are Muslim, right? Rather, Tawheed includes loving Allah, submitting to Allah, humbling yourself, obeying His commands, worshipping Him with sincerity, and seeking the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal. So, is this point clear? Inshallah? Okay. So now we just want to talk a little bit about, just today we'll wrap up Tawhid Al-Rububiyah. What is the impact of Tawhid Al-Rububiyah as as a believer, as a Muslim? How does it affect me in my life? Well, several things. And again, these are meant to be obvious points, but it's important for us to acknowledge them, and it brings us closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla when we discuss these things. And the first point is exactly the point that we say, believing in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah brings us closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Why? Because someone who believes in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, someone who understands that the food that I'm eating and enjoying, the water that I open the tap and I drink, the health that Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving, the heart that's beating inside my body right now, the snacks that you guys are eating right now and you're eating and drinking, the blessings that you are all enjoying right now. You now, as a believer in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, you are now acknowledging that all of this is coming from Allah Azza wa Jalla. And therefore, you cannot help but feel a sense of appreciation, a sense of gratefulness to Allah Azza wa Jalla, that you're looking at your food and you're thinking to yourself, if Allah had wanted, He wouldn't have given me this food. If Allah had wanted, He would not have given me the water, or the snacks, or my health, or security, or peace, or family, or any of these things. All of these are in the control of Allah Azza wa Jal, yet out of Allah's mercy and kindness and love, He is choosing to give these things to me, even though I am not worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal the way that I should be worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? Nobody here in this room, okay? Boys, if you want to talk, please go upstairs. Nobody here in this room, myself included, ever will worship Allah the way that Allah deserves to be worshipped. Because we all do certain sins, we all do certain actions that waste time, right? So we do certain things that are perhaps displeasing or a waste of time. Okay? So therefore, when you understand all of these things, you appreciate Allah's blessings towards you, and that makes you want to worship Allah even more. That grows your love towards Allah Azza wa Jal. That makes you want to become more sincere and to learn more about Allah Azza wa Jal. So, and again, there are many verses in the Quran that back up this understanding. For example, there's the famous, the words of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, that as he is standing in front of his people, you guys know the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, as he was, he first saw the sun, and then he saw a planet, and he saw the moon, and then he saw the sun, right? This is recorded in the Quran. Okay, so Ibrahim alayhi salam, he's standing in front. Now, by the way, about this story, just as a side comment, and many people misunderstand this. They think that, Ibrahim didn't know who his Lord was and he was discovering it. This is completely wrong. Ibrahim, he knew that his Lord is Allah, but he's trying to convince his people. And he's very intelligent in doing so. So he's standing in front of his people and he says, oh, look, I just saw a planet, that must be my Rabb. And he's saying it in front of his people. And then the planet leaves and he says, how can this be my Rabb? Then the moon comes. Again, his Rabb is Allah, he understands this. But now he's saying it in front of his people, look, the moon shows up, that must be my Rabb. It's so beautiful and shiny and nice in the sky, but then what happens? The moon disappears. So he says, how can this be my Rabb? And then the sun comes up, he's like, mashallah, look, the sun is so bright and so powerful and so big. That must be my Rabb. And he's saying it in front of his people so that they can get their brain working and running. But then the sun disappears. He says, then how can this be my Rabb? Rather, I am now turning my face towards the one who created this planet, and the one who created this moon, and the one who created this sun. And there's no way I can associate any partners with this Rabb. But of course, the story of Ibrahim continues the way that we know it, that they did not believe in him and whatnot, right? But this is a declaration of Tawhid al-Rububiyyah, and a declaration of how a person should apply Tawhid, how Tawhid al-Rububiyyah should affect our attitude towards Allah. I am now turning my face towards Allah, my Creator, the one who created everything. And I want to become closer to Him. And I'm not going to associate partners with Him. In another place in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jalla quotes again Ibrahim alayhi salam. SubhanAllah, Ibrahim is, there's a reason why Ibrahim has the status that he does. Um, and so he says, Surah Al-Shu'ara, what was it? So he begins to say that I reject everything that you guys are worshipping except Allah. Why? Because Allah is the one who created me. So why would I not worship Him? وَالَّذِي هُوَ يُطْعِمُنِي وَيَسْقِينِ, and He's the one who feeds me, and He's the one who gives me water. So why would I not worship Him? وَإِذَا مَرِضْتُ فَهُوَ يَشْفِينِ, and whenever I get sick, Allah is the one who brings me the health back again. So why would I not worship Him? وَالَّذِي يُمِيتُنِي ثُمَّ يُحْيِينِ, and He's the one who will take away my life, and He's the one who granted me life in the first place. So why would I not worship Him? So this is what I mean. When a person understands Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah truly, they will get a sense of appreciation towards the blessings of Allah Azza wa Jal, and that will push them to come closer to Allah Azza wa Jal through their act of worship. In addition, someone who truly believes in Tawhid Rububiyah and truly believes in the authority of Allah, that Allah is the one who is the king of all the kings, Allah is the one who is in complete control over everything on the earth, that Allah is the absolute one who has full control and authority and sovereignty, then this person will never feel stressed out or sad because of anything in their life. How come? Because now by me saying that I truly believe that Allah Azza wa Jal is in full control out of everything, then do you think that whatever stressful situation you are going through right now, that Allah doesn't know about it? Do you think that Allah Azza wa Jal is not able to take you away from it? Like let's say a person is stressed out because they're having family problems, or they're stressed out because they're poor and they need to pay their bills, or they don't have enough money to do certain things. Do you think that Allah, the one who is in control, the one who provides and the one who takes, do you think that Allah is not aware of your situation? And do you think that Allah doesn't have the ability to lift off the difficulty and the stress that you are in? If you are suffering from a lack of money, do you think that Allah is not capable of providing you with money? If you are someone who's struggling because of poor health, do you think that Allah, the provider, is not able to provide you with the health? And so a mu'min who believes truly in Tawheed Ar-Rububiyah and truly believes that only Allah is the one who is in absolute control, this is a person who will never feel any stress because of family, because of a job, because of school, because of anything. Why? Because I have my Rabb with me. I have my Rabb with me. And where do we see this? One of the beautiful examples, again, we see this in the Quran, is in Prophet Musa, the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. We are told in the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam in Surah Al-Shu'ara, that, the story goes when Musa and the Banu Israel were fleeing from Fir'aun and his soldiers. At one point, what happened? They came in front of the sea. And there was no other place for them to flee or run away. And they were surrounded, boys in the front. If you want to talk, I'm not going to say it again. Please go upstairs, okay? So, the Banu Israel, Allah says in the Quran, they said, Inna lamudrakun, khalas, this is the end of the road for us. There's nowhere else for us to go. Khalas, this is where Fir'aun and his soldiers are going to capture us, they're going to kill us, they're going to treat us worse than they were before. But what did Musa alayhi salam say? And that shows the essence of what I'm trying to mention here. He says, Kalla inna ma'i rabbi sayahdin. I have my Lord with me. This is not the end of the road, because I have my Lord with me. And what happened as soon as he said this? That at that point, once he acknowledged that, Allah Azza wa Jalla said to him, hold your stick and hit the sea and we'll see what happens. And Allah split the sea for Musa and for the Banu Israel to escape from Fir'aun. So, why do you think Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling you this story? We all read the story of Prophet Musa alayhi salam, and we know the story of Fir'aun and whatnot, and the miracles, and the sea split up. Oh my God, it's so cool, right? What's the point of the story? Why do you think Allah is just giving you bedtime stories? What do you think is the point of the story? Do you think the one who split the seas for Musa alayhi salam is not capable to get you out of the situation you are in? No matter how depressing the situation you're in may be, or no matter how much you feel like there is nowhere else for you to go, as long as you have your Rabb with you, there is always somewhere for you to go. And this is one of the greatest blessings that we have as Muslims, that we have somewhere to always turn to. Whenever life corners you, whenever you feel like there's no more point, that I'm gonna give up, there's nothing, there's no hope. For a believer who believes in Tawhid Al-Rububiyah, there is always somewhere for me to turn to. That is Allah Azza wa Jal. And why do I say this is a great blessing? Because other people who don't believe in Allah, people who don't believe in Tawhid Al-Rububiyah, guess what? When they get cornered, they are cornered. They got nowhere else to go. So where do they resort to? They resort to things like alcohol. They resort to things like drugs. They resort to things which are haram. Why? Because they tell you, and I've heard this personally many times, "Ya akhi, I'm in so much stress. I go to drink so I can forget." That's why they go and drink. That's why they go and end up in a life of drugs, and they go end up in addictions and whatnot. And some people, they end up homeless and whatnot. Why? Because ya akhi, life got to me and it's so stressful. And I don't know where to go, and therefore I just need something to make me forget. I need to get high on drugs so I just don't need to think about my problems anymore. I need to get drunk so that my mind doesn't work anymore. Subhanallah. When you hear these things, wallahi, and I'm not making these things up, I'm telling you, these are stories that I've heard from my own people and my own friends who used to attend university with me who were non-Muslims. And they would tell me this exactly. And I would say, Subhanallah, how blessed we are that we have a Rabb that we worship. How blessed we are for having Tawheed Al-Rububiyah. So this is one of the greatest impacts that for us when it comes to believing in Tawheed Al-Rububiyah. You will always have somewhere to turn to. You will not ever feel, yes, okay, we might feel under the pressured, you might feel stressed out, but you always know that there is a way out for you. And there are many examples for this in the Quran. We mentioned the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, but Allah Azza wa Jalla also encourages us over and over in so many different places in the Quran. وَعَلَى اللَّهِ فَتَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Put your trust in Allah Azza wa Jalla if you are truly believers. So this is one of the most beautiful benefits and impacts that we have in our lives when it comes to believing in Tawhid Al-Rububiyah. And the last point that we'll mention before we wrap up Tawhid Al-Rububiyah. Similarly, now that believes that Allah is in full control, and Allah is the one who provides and takes away, and Allah is the one who has the complete authority, now this is a Rabb who is in charge. He is the only one who is in charge. Therefore, I don't want to disobey him. I don't want to make him angry, because I'm worried now. If the one who gives me my money, and the one who gives me my food and my drink and my health and my family and all the blessings, what if I anger him now? If I anger him, perhaps because of my sins, because of my disobedience, Allah Azza wa Jalla may choose to stop giving me some of these things. Allah might choose to withhold my health from me, to take away some of my money, to take away some of the provision. Allah might cause me to live under fear. So that's why I don't want to upset the one who is in charge. So this is what it means to fear Allah Azza wa Jal. You see, when a person worships Allah Azza wa Jal, it has to be two things. There has to be a combination of hope and fear. Okay? So you should always be hopeful in the mercy of Allah, in the hopeful that Allah will have mercy on you, that Allah will forgive you, hopeful that that inshallah there is always a place for you, that inshallah Allah will grant you Jannah, the highest rank of Jannah, that you are also going to be someone who will be treated well on the Day of Judgment. So that's worshipping Allah hopefully, with hope. But you should also have the flip side of the equation, to worship Allah with fear. Worshipping Allah and at the same time saying, how do I know that my deeds are being accepted? I'm offering my prayers, but I have fear, what if Allah doesn't accept it? I have a fear that I'm going to disobey Allah and perhaps I'm going to make istighfar and Allah is not going to accept my repentance. How can we ever guarantee that a single deed is getting accepted? That a single page of Quran that you read is getting accepted? That a single sujood that you are making is being accepted? Nobody knows this. Nobody can guarantee it. And therefore, you should never feel safe. So a person must worship Allah Azza wa Jal with a combination of hope and fear, such that when they are feeling down, they worship Allah with hope that hopefully that Allah will forgive them. But at the same time, when things are going a little too well for them, they now have fear. What if Allah is upset with me? What if Allah is testing me? What if Allah is not going to accept my deeds? What if Allah is this, and that? So there has to be hope and there has to be fear. So understanding who is the creator and who is the Rabb will cause a person to have fear towards Allah Azza wa Jal, and that will cause them to avoid doing sins because you don't want to upset the one who is in charge. Okay? And in case they do sin, and trust me, every single one of us sin. That's part of your nature as a human being. We all end up in times where we end up doing sins, whether that is looking at something that is haram, or saying things which are bad, or harming, doing something that is harmful. Okay, whatever that is. Everybody here, you guys know yourselves. We all know what sins we are doing. Okay, and you should not ever never say what you are doing as sins. But the fact of the matter is, myself and all of you, we are all sinful. So, therefore, out of fear of our Rabb, we turn to Allah, hoping that He will accept our repentance, and hoping that He will forgive our sins, and that He will not punish us because of our sins. That He will not punish us, not in this world and not in the after. Sometimes Allah Azza wa Jalla might choose to punish someone in this world by causing them to become sick, by causing them to feel stress, to taste a little bit of poverty, to taste a little bit of fear in this world, to taste a little bit of situations that they might encounter in their lives. But sometimes Allah does this in order to punish them in this dunya, such that He does not have to punish them in the akhirah. And we ask Allah that He does not punish us in the akhirah at all, because that is a punishment that none of us can bear. The punishment of the akhirah cannot even cannot even compare to the punishment of this dunya. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal teaches us the dua in the Quran that we should always make. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. That Allah give me the blessings of this world and the blessings of the after, and save us from the punishment of Jahannam. And in another dua that Allah Azza wa Jal teaches us in the Quran, when Adam alayhi salam disobeyed Allah Azza wa Jal, and they were expelled from Jannah, what did he say? قال ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. That, oh Allah, we have wronged ourselves, and if you do not have mercy on us, again, this is now asking Allah out of fear. Oh Allah, you're the one in charge. If you don't have mercy on me right now, and if you choose not to forgive me, I'm done for. Who's going to save me? If Allah, you choose not to forgive me, who is going to save me now? My parents? My friends? My teachers? Who is going to save me from the punishment? Nobody will save me. Only Allah can choose to save me if He wishes to. And therefore, we worship Allah also with fear, and that fear would only come from someone who truly understands who is the Rabb, who is the one who is in charge, and what is He capable of. So all of these are different reasons as to why Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah plays a very vital role. It's a core. It's one of the categories of Tawhid. And this is why someone who has Tawheed and truly understands these concepts, even though, again, we mentioned these are very simple things, but when you grasp them, it will change your entire lives. And it will change the way that you view everything and the way that you think about everything. This is why we take the time to discuss Aqeedah and the concepts of Tawheed. So I want to pause here for a second to take any questions if there are any. Are there any questions about anything or Tawheed al-Rububiyah or whatnot? Questions? No questions? Okay. Moving on to the hadith of the week. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: ثلاث من كن فيه وجد حلاوة الإيمان. Three qualities, if they are found within a person, then this person shall experience the sweetness of faith. He will understand what does it mean to have, he will taste iman. What are these three things? He says, أن يكون الله ورسوله أحب إليه مما سواهما. That Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they become more beloved to him than anything else. وأن يحب المرء لا يحبه إلا لله, to love another person and to only love them for the sake of Allah and for nothing else. وأن يكره أن يعود في الكفر كما يكره أن يقذف في النار, and to hate to go back to disbelief the same way as he would hate to be thrown into the fire. It's an authentic hadith. But before I go and dive into it, anyone want to share their research findings about this hadith? Someone please share it. You did it last time, no? Yeah? No? Okay, go ahead.
Really enjoy iman. So you must love Allah. Love somebody only for the sake of Allah. Hate, and you must hate to, and you must hate disbelief, and you must hate to be burned.
Jazakallah khair. Okay. Let's dive a little bit more into this hadith. It's a very important hadith, very beautiful hadith. And wallahi, if we apply this hadith, you will become the best believers in the world, the best Muslim practicing Muslims in the world, if you understand and you apply this hadith. So about Anas ibn Malik, we already mentioned who he is in a previous lecture, I believe, so I don't need to. I'm just gonna save the time and not mention who he is again. Young boy, his mother gifted him. Again, I'm not gonna share the story. His mother gifted him, right, and he spent a little bit of time with Prophet ﷺ, and then he became a very knowledgeable person. Again, you can just go recap the story from the previous lectures when we talked about Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu. The first thing that we learn in this hadith, before we actually dive into the 3 points, is actually the first sentence, which should actually come out as a little bit interesting to us. That iman has a taste. What does it mean, that sweetness of faith? That means iman has a taste. It's not a physical taste. You can't eat iman and taste a sweetness of iman. But iman has a taste. And iman is sweet. And the example of iman to our bodies is the example of food and drink. Okay? You see, every person is made up out of a physical body and a spiritual body. Right? Everybody's aware of the physical body. That's your body on the outside, and everybody takes care of their physical body. You eat your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, you eat the healthy foods, you try to avoid the unhealthy foods, right? Whenever you get sick, your physical body is sick, you now take medicine, and you want to take care of your medicine, you rest up, right? You go and exercise so that you are always fit and healthy. So, right? So everybody has a physical body, and everybody here wants to stay physically healthy because it feels good to be physically healthy, doesn't it? Well, there is also a spiritual body that all of us have. And that is in our heart. Not the same heart. I'm not talking about the physical beating heart. That's a physical body. But I'm talking about the qalb. The qalb that is within every one of us. This is a spiritual heart. And the more healthy the spiritual body is, the stronger their iman, the stronger their faith in Allah Azza wa Jal, and the better Muslim they are. And the weaker their spiritual body is, the further away they are from Allah Azza wa Jal. And just like your physical body needs to be fed and nourished, your spiritual body also needs to be fed and nourished. Your physical body is nourished with healthy foods and drinks, right? Your spiritual body is nourished by spiritual actions. Things like salah, things like Quran, things like adhkar, things like doing any kind of good deed for the sake of Allah. This is the nourishment of the spiritual body. And just like the physical body, if you leave it long enough and if you starve your physical body, you're gonna grow weak. And eventually, if a person starves themselves for too long, they're also gonna die. Well, a spiritual body is the same thing. A spiritual body, if you starve it from Quran, if you starve it from prayers, starve it from adhkar, starve it from istighfar, and doing all of these things, then the spiritual body will die. And what does it mean for a spiritual body to die? What does it mean to have a dead spiritual heart? It means that a person will hear the verses of Allah and will see the signs of Allah and it will not affect them whatsoever. Their heart is dead, completely dead. Okay? And therefore, every one of us, we have a duty to nourish our spiritual bodies. And think of it this way, by the way. Think of it this way. And it's a beautiful description that some of the scholars they mention in their books. Think of your heart, not the physical heart, the spiritual heart, as a container. Okay? And you need to fill it with iman. You want to pour iman into your heart. Okay? And so, as long as the container, like think of a cup, okay? As long as the cup is standing and I pour water on top of the cup and the cup is upright and standing, it will take in all of the water. That is the sign of a healthy heart, a heart that is upright. However, when someone starts to do sins, what happens? Now, when a person sins, now a black dot appears on the heart. So now the cup tilts. And the person does more sins and more sins, tilts more. And now what happens? If I pour water, will a lot of the water enter? A small portion will enter. The more it tilts, the less of the water enters. And it will continue to tilt, and then if it tilts and becomes upside down, do you think there's any possibility of water entering this cup? This is the example of the healthy and the dead heart. So, then how do I nourish my heart to the point that it doesn't tilt and it stays upright? This is good deeds, asking Allah to forgive you, avoiding the haram in the first place, right? All of these things ensure that the cup tilts back and becomes upright. So everybody needs to nourish their spiritual body. And similar to how your spiritual body, when it feels sick, you don't enjoy a lot of things. Even though when you are healthy, everybody likes to eat cake or chocolate or whatever it is, right? Everybody likes that, ice cream. But now when you are feeling sick, now when you have a fever and you're in bed, how do you guys know how you feel, right? You feel your head feels like someone's banging on your head. It's just a big headache, and you're not in the mood to eat. And then someone says, hey, take some ice cream. Hey, some cake, right? Do you think you're in the mood to eat right now? It's not going to be enjoyable. It's not going to be fun. It's not, you're not going to enjoy it as much as you usually do when you're healthy. Similarly, when you have a sore throat and you're eating something sweet and you're like, oh my God, I wish I didn't have a sore throat so I can enjoy this thing. Well, the spiritual body is the same thing. If the spiritual body becomes sick, and how does the spiritual body become sick? For several different reasons. Because of doing too much haram, because of being arrogant, because of being greedy, because there's a whole list of things that will cause a person to have a sick spiritual body. When a person starts to have a sick spiritual body, then this person will not enjoy the nourishment of the spiritual body. They will not enjoy prayer. They will not enjoy Quran. They will not enjoy any act of worship. They won't enjoy adhkar. It's not enjoyable to them. So, subhanAllah, you would find sometimes people come and ask that, I don't like to pray. Prayer feels so heavy to me. I don't enjoy it very much. It's so boring to me. Quran, I'm not motivated. I don't want to read Quran. I don't want to memorize Quran. I don't enjoy it. I don't want to do adhkar. I don't want to do this. What do I want to do? I just want to go play. I just want to go have fun. I just want to go hang out with my friends. Realize that if this is my state, that I am in the danger zone. I am in the danger zone because a sign of a sick spiritual body is a body that does not enjoy the things that nourish the spiritual body. Just like how a sick physical body does not enjoy cake, a sick spiritual body will now start to enjoy the acts of worship. So we have to be mindful of this. We'll take questions in a second, inshallah. However, on the other hand, someone who tastes the sweetness of iman, healthy spiritual body, and tastes the pleasure of praying. And subhanAllah, we've all perhaps felt this at one point, maybe in Ramadan, during one of the nights in Taraweeh. The Imam's recitation is just so beautiful, and everybody's like, the vibes of the masjid are amazing, right? And everybody's praying together, everybody's Quran. And subhanAllah, sometimes you might not even be understanding what's being recited, but you feel like your iman is about to enter through the roof from like how much you're enjoying the prayer. And even though that on saying on normal days, I don't enjoy the prayers that much, but subhanAllah, right now I wish the prayer would never end. Right? We've all experienced this sometimes, every once in a while perhaps, and usually people have that feeling in Ramadan or whatnot, right? So that is a form of the sweetness of iman. And wallahi, once you experience the sweetness of iman, you will never want to stop it. The same way that someone in the physical body, they get addicted to sugar and chocolate. I love sweets. I want to eat sweets. I want to eat cake. I want to eat ice cream. I am addicted, right? Even though it's not healthy for your physical body. But when someone tastes the sweetness of iman, they will do whatever they can such that they can remain in that state. If tasting that joy of praying means that I have to avoid sins, I will avoid sins. That I will increase in my good deeds. That I'm going to pray more. That I'm going to wake up at night and leave. Some people might wonder, like, how does someone just wake up in the middle of the night just so they can go make wudu and pray? Like, I just want to rest, ya akhi. To them, these people, they enjoy, and they've tasted the iman, and they enjoy it so much that they cannot wait to wake up in the middle of the night. They can't wait. So they can wake up, jump out of bed, make wudu, and start praying. Whereas to some of us, even our obligatory prayer, we struggle to even get out of our bed. This is the difference between someone who's tasted the sweetness of iman versus someone who has issues with their spiritual body. We'll just phrase it that way. And so tasting the sweetness of iman also by default means you understand the bitterness of lacking iman. And so you understand that I want the sweet part, I don't want the bitter part. And trust me when I say this, every one of you, every one of us, we have a hole in our heart. And that hole can only be filled with iman. No matter what the pleasures of the world that you may have, you can be the wealthiest billionaire in the world. You can have 10 different Ferraris and Lamborghinis. You can have the biggest castles, several different mansions in California and in Hawaii and in Vancouver and in all of the fancy places in the world. If this person does not have iman, then trust me, they are living a miserable life. Do not be deceived by what you see on social media. Do not be deceived by what the celebrities post about big cars and houses, or what the people post on like TikTok and other places, that they are traveling the world and they're in the beaches and they're living the dream, and you're thinking to yourself, I wish I can live their life. Wallahi, they wish they can live your life. They wish they can live your life. It's not the other way around. Because you have something that they do not have. And they will never have it unless they choose to believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. That is a hole that will only be filled with iman. Anyways, moving on with the hadith. I need to move on. The three qualities that have to be present in order for a person to taste the sweetness of iman. What are they? Loving Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam even more than you love anything else. More than your own mom and dad. More than yourself even. Now that's a whole nother level. Loving Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than you love yourself. What does that mean? How can I love someone more than I love myself? Very simple. Well, I as a person, I have my desires. I have things which I want to do and I wish I could do. Sometimes I get the desire, I want to go and play games. Sometimes I get the desire, I want to go and do something which is not allowed, right? Every person has their desires. But then you think to yourself, but Allah does not love that. But Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does not love that. And so you prefer them over your own desire. And so you fight against your own desire. And you tell your desire to basically shut up. I'm not going to do what you wanted me to do. I'm not going to do what you're whispering to me for me to do in my head. That go and waste your time, go and play video games, go and do this and that, go and commit this kind of sin. It's going to be enjoyable. You're going to silence yourself. You're going to be like, I'm not going to listen to you because I love Allah and His Messenger more than I love you. That is another level. That is another level. But that is the expectation, believe it or not. That is the expectation. Okay? Loving Allah Azza wa Jalla and loving Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is easy to say with the tongue. And I've mentioned this several times to you before. If I go and ask anybody, hey, do you love Allah? Everyone smack me in the face. Like, what do you mean, Yakhi? What do you mean you love Allah, Yakhi? You're trying to insult me over here? Obviously, I love Allah. Obviously, I love Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah, I forgot what I was saying before the adhan began. Yes, so yeah, I just remembered. So I was saying, loving Allah Azza wa Jal and Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam does not just come from the tongue. Because that's the easiest thing in the world to do. If I go out in the streets and I offer someone $100, just say that you love Allah and Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I love Allah and Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Give me $100. That's easy to say. But truly loving someone means knowing everything about them. And I mentioned this actually in the very first lecture, if you remember. I don't know how many of you actually remember. But I remember this. I mentioned this in the first lecture. Knowing showing someone that you truly love them, okay, whether it is Allah, whether it is Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or whether it is anyone else that you know, you show this through your actions. You show them through your knowledge of them. So if you want to show that your friend that you appreciate them and you love them, you will probably learn, okay, what is their favorite food? What is their favorite color? What do they like to wear? What do they like to do? What do they like and what do they dislike? When were they born? Where were they born? Where is their family? Who is their family? You will learn these things about them. Why? Because you love them. And to show someone that you love them, the strongest way to do this is to know them, to truly show someone that you know them. And the same thing applies for our knowledge with Allah Azza wa Jal and our relationship with Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you are truly someone who loves Allah Azza wa Jal, then you are someone who goes out of their way to learn about Allah Azza wa Jal. Learn the book of Allah, learn the signs of Allah, learn the names of Allah, the qualities and the attributes of Allah, reflecting about Allah's commands, reflecting over Allah's prohibitions, what is halal and what is haram, doing that which is halal, avoiding that which is haram, submitting yourself to Allah Azza wa Jal, reflecting over the creation of Allah, right? This is how you show Allah Azza wa Jal that you truly love Allah Azza wa Jal. That now Allah is on your mind all day and all night. That everything you do, you're thinking of Allah. Okay? So this is what it means to love Allah Azza wa Jal. And the more that you find that you are doing things which please Allah Azza wa Jal, and that you are avoiding things which displease Allah Azza wa Jal, this is the best indicator of whether you are someone who truly loves Allah or not. Someone who is regularly committing sins, this is an indication that they are falling short in their love of Allah. Because why? Because what is doing sins in the first place? Committing sins means that at this moment in time, I prefer my own desires over Allah. That's what a sin means. I prefer following my own desires and what I want more than what Allah says. And that's everybody falls into sins. Sometimes we have times where we slip up and we tend to do sins. Okay, nobody can avoid doing sins, but that is an indication. Your frequency of doing sins is an indication. How much do you actually love Allah, and how close or how far are you in front from Allah Azza wa Jal? And the same thing comes with Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. If you are truly someone who loves Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then you should actually put in effort to know everything about him. Learn about his seerah. This is why we're learning the seerah. Learn about his life. Learn about how he was as a child, how he was as a youth, how he was as an adult. What did he look like? What did he like to eat? What were his hobbies? What was his hobbies? Who was his family? Who were his wives? Who were his children? This is not something only for a teacher or for a sheikh to know. This is something that every single one of you should know. If you want to truly show that you love Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then this is how you show it. And you ponder again over the commandments of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and you submit yourself to the commands of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam when he tells you to do something, and you also accept it when he tells you to avoid something, whether you understand it or not. And we mentioned this again in a previous hadith. Whether you understand it, whether it matches with your logic or not, you show that you love Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam by following whatever he tells you to do. And in order to do that, you have to show effort. You have to show Allah that you're putting in effort to love Allah by at the very least praying your obligations, by doing all your obligatory deeds, and that you want to come closer to Allah Azza wa Jal by doing nawafil. In another hadith, وَلَا يَزَالُ عَبْدِي يَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَيْهِ بِالنَّوَافِلِ حَتَّى أُحِبَّهُ. That the way to come closer to Allah, one of the most effective ways, is doing the voluntary actions. You see people, they view voluntary actions, okay, voluntary, khalas, I don't need to do it. Sunnah, sunnah, I don't need to do it. I need to pray 2 rak'ahs after dhuhr, I need to pray 2 rak'ahs after maghrib, I don't have to. 2 rak'ahs before fajr, optional. I have to dress in a certain way, that's optional. So, if you want to show Allah Azza wa Jal that you are truly putting in effort to love Allah, then you start to do the voluntary actions and not avoid them. Similarly, if you want to show that you're putting an effort in loving Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, then go and compare your lifestyle to the lifestyle of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The more your lifestyle matches his lifestyle, the more that's the bigger of an indication that you love Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. How much do you follow his sunnah? Do you start by saying Adhkar al-Sabah? Do you use the washroom the same way that he used the washroom? Do you eat the same way that he used to eat? Drink the same way that he drinks? Do you sit the same way he sits? Do you walk the same way he walks? Do you do the same things when he exits his house? Do you greet people the same way? Do you interact with people the same way? How much of the sunnah and the life of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ do you actually apply in your life? That is the indicator that shows how much do you actually love Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is the first thing that is required in order for you to taste the sweetness of iman. You need to have genuine love of Allah, genuine love of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the point where they become more beloved than your own selves and more beloved than your own parents. And once a person has that love, because why does it make sense that this will give me the sweetness of iman? Once a person grows and has this love, then it shall be easy for me. It shall become easier for me to go and pray because I love Allah. It shall be easier for me to go and do all of these voluntary actions when I learn about them. Why? Because I love Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and I want to be with him and I want to follow him. So this is why it is important for us to learn about our deen. This is all the reasons why it's important to us to learn about Quran, learn about Islam, learn about our Prophet. So because through our education, we grow closer to them and we grow in our love towards them compared to someone who has no knowledge whatsoever about these things. The second point that he mentions of how do we obtain the sweetness of iman, and that is to love someone for the sake of Allah. Loving someone for the sake of Allah. Now, I won't expand on this too much because we've actually discussed this before. However, there is a hadith that mentions that the strongest bond of faith, the strongest bond that any human can have with another human being, is the bond that they have when they love for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And we mentioned also previously that there is a hadith that there will be 7 categories of people on the day that Allah Azza wa Jal will grant them shade on the day of judgment. One of these people, one of these categories, are people tahabba fillah. These are people who loved each other for the sake of Allah, and so they would gather together, they would hang out together for the sake of Allah, and they would depart from each other for the sake of Allah. So a person will love for the sake of Allah, and he will hate for the sake of Allah. And so the sweetness, one of the factors to get the sweetness of iman is to love for the sake of Allah. Now, what exactly does it mean to love someone for the sake of Allah? Very simple. And only to love them for the sake of Allah. You see, this is again important for us to understand, especially when we are at schools and making friends and someone and such. Sometimes I might choose to become a friend with someone because they're good at math and they're going to help me with math. Sometimes I might choose to become a friend with someone because they're really funny and they crack some funny jokes and I have a lot of fun when I am with them. I might choose to become friends with someone because they're good at Fortnite and they're going to carry me and so I can get some dubs, right? I might choose to become a friend with someone because they have the same hobbies as myself and we can go and have fun together and do fun things together. This is not haram. Okay, this is okay. But are you now choosing to love that person for the sake of Allah? No. Right now, you're not loving that person for the sake of Allah. You're loving him because you have some sort of benefit with him. And again, that's not haram. You have a benefit because, okay, that person is smart and he's a really nice person and he's going to help me with my math homework. That person, he's a really fun person to be with. I'm going to have fun with them. Okay? But that's not what it means to love for the sake of Allah. Loving for the sake of Allah means I love that person because he's a person who memorizes Quran. I love that person because he has such a beautiful recitation of Quran. I love that person because he always reminds me of prayers. I love that person because every time I listen to the reminders, it just brings me back to myself and it brings me closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. I love that person because they always bring me to the masjid. They always pull me to the masjid. That is loving for the sake of Allah. Even though you love them for the sake of Allah, they could also be funny people. They could also be smart at math. They could also be good at Fortnite and whatnot. But that's not why you chose to befriend them. You chose to befriend such a person because they're good at Quran. I chose to befriend that person because they're always hanging out in the masjid. They're always praying their prayers. They always remind me of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is what it means to love someone for the sake of Allah. And trust me, that is the strongest bond that you can ever have with anybody. To love them for the sake of Allah. And this is why I say it all of the time for the boys, whenever we sit down in Islamic studies and whatnot, every now and then we say it. Cherish your friends who are in a Quran school. Cherish your friends that you see around you right now in the masjid, because those are the friends whom you are befriending for the sake of Allah. And those friends, that friendship will last for a lifetime, trust me. The friends that you are hanging out with at school and befriending them for math, that friendship is going to die off, most likely, as soon as you graduate for school. Sorry, just going to tell you ahead of time. Those friends that you're hanging out with in junior high and high school, trust me, as soon as you enter university, they're going to disappear. And the friends that you befriend at university, as soon as you graduate university, they're going to disappear as well. Okay? And you can ask anyone and they will tell you the exact same thing. Because the reasons why you chose to become friends and why you chose to love each other was a very, it's a reason. It was a reason. And it caused that friendship to last for some time. But that reason wasn't strong enough for that friendship to last for a lifetime. Okay? You loved each other because of Fortnite, and then one day you get bored of Fortnite. Oh, guess what? You're gonna stop becoming friends with that person at some point. It's gonna die off. Okay? You became friends with that person because they're funny and they're cracking jokes and whatnot. One day you're just gonna become mature enough that those jokes are no longer funny to you. And one day you're just gonna stop becoming friends with that person. However, when you love someone for the sake of Allah, and as a Muslim, you always have to love Allah and always have to love Prophet Muhammad. As long as that person loves Allah, as long as that person loves Quran, loves praying, loves doing things which please Allah, then I will always end up loving that person. And this is why the bond between a brother and a brother and a sister, between a sister and a sister, for the sake of Allah, this is an unbreakable bond. This is the strongest bond. But again, I have to just repeat it for the sake of clarity. Uh, you know, boy is still not allowed to go to a girl, or a girl is still not allowed to go to a boy and say, "Oh, I love you for the sake of Allah." Okay, you're not allowed to do that. Okay, let me just be very clear, just so that nobody says, "Oh, mashallah, I love this sister for the sake of Allah," or no, 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 no. Okay, that doesn't work that way. A boy can go to another boy and be like, "Brother, I love you for the sake of Allah." Sister can go to another sister and be like, "Sister, I love you for the sake of Allah." Boy does not go up to a girl, girl does not go up to a boy. Okay, let me just make that very, very clear, just so that we don't run into any disasters here in the masjid or outside. Okay. Now the third point, we will not really talk about it that much because, and inshallah, it's not relevant to us, and that is to hate to return back into disbelief the same way that a person hates to be thrown into the hellfire. But the point here is very simple, and nobody likes to touch the fire. Everybody likes to stay away from fire, right? And that's only the fire of this world, right? The fire of this world, when you touch a hot surface, you're like, oh, stings, right? And sometimes it might leave a mark for a few days, and it might like be sensitive, right? If this is the fire of this world, then how do you think the fire of the hereafter? So a person would hate to return back to kufr, to disbelieving, more than just like they would hate to be thrown into the fire. Okay, so again, inshallah, this does not apply to to many of us because alhamdulillah, most of us are born and raised as Muslims. But even to those of us who were not born as Muslims and they ended up converting into Islam, then part of the qualities that you must have in order to obtain the sweetness of faith is to really, really hate what you used to be before. That you hated when you were a disbeliever. You hated that now you're a Muslim and you have an understanding of Islam. You look back and you're just thinking to yourself, how could I be so narrow minded that I would not worship Allah? How could I be so narrow minded that I would associate partners with Allah? Or that I would reject Allah in the first place, right? So this is what it means to hate it, to hate kufr, to hate disbelieving in Allah, and that also applies that you have a love for Allah Azza wa Jal. So these are the three qualities that inshallah, if they are present within someone, then this is how prayers will become enjoyable to you. This is how gaining knowledge will become enjoyable to you. This is how Quran and memorizing and reviewing and studying will become enjoyable to you. Much more enjoyable than everything else. Much more enjoyable than hanging out and wasting time and watching movies and playing video games. Your joy will actually become to pray. You will want to wake up in the middle of the night and leave your rest just so that you can worship Allah. Why? Because now you're addicted to the sweetness. You're addicted to the sweetness of iman. And so we ask Allah to grant all of us the stage where we obtain this level, where we enjoy and we sense and we feel and taste that sweetness of iman, and such that we would never go back to our old ways, inshallah. The next hadith I will share with you for next week. And actually, we will not be discussing this hadith next week because, in case you missed the announcement, next week will be a review session. So, review session, it will be in the form of kahoots. So, we will not be going through the actual lectures. We're just going to be having questions and answers. So, take the time within the next week to review all the content that we all the content which we discussed in the previous lectures. We're going to have Kahoots, questions and answers, and winners and whatnot. But this is the hadith that we're going to be discussing, inshallah, 2 weeks from now. But before that, are there any questions before we continue? No questions? Okay. Is it enough to believe in Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah in order to be a Muslim? Explain. Yes. Yes, go ahead. Very good. So it's not enough because we even mentioned that some disbelievers, Iblis, Quraysh, they believed in Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah, but it has to be rather accompanied with action, sincerity, devotion, right? How does a believer in Tawhid Ar-Rububiyah bring them closer to Allah Azza wa Jalla? Yes, Adam? Very good. So fear is one aspect, and also appreciation, right? That you now you're appreciative, you're grateful to Allah that Allah is my Rabb. So Allah is the one who's granting me all my food and my drink and my health and my family and my house and my peace and everything that I get to enjoy is coming from Allah. So you appreciate Allah and you will love Allah even more. And why does a believer in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah never feel stress in their lives? Yes, in the front. Yep. Very good. So they understand that Allah is the one who's controlling everything. Allah is aware of my situation, and Allah is the one in control. And the one who's in control can very easily flip my situation upside down and make it into a good situation and change my situation to the best. So this is one of the greatest blessings that we have. And how does believing in Tawheed al-Rububiyyah cause someone to avoid sinning? Yes, Isaac. Very good, because the believer, he will know that Allah. So they will start fearing Allah because they know that Allah is knowing what they're doing. Allah is watching them. When we are sitting, Allah is watching you. Allah is hearing you. Allah knows what's going through in your head and what you are doing as you are sitting. So a person will feel a sense of fear from Allah Azza wa Jal to avoid sinning and such that and out of fear of falling into punishment, and that will cause them to also quickly go and repent to Allah Azza wa Jal once they end up falling into sins. What is the effect of out of tasting the sweetness of faith? What will happen? Yes, Ivan, the back. Exactly. You will get addicted to the sweetness of Iman, literally. And you will never ever want to leave that. And you will do whatever you can such that you may continue to experience that feeling throughout your life. What are the three qualities that will result in you tasting the sweetness of Iman? Yes, Abdurrahman?
To believe in, to be friends with people, that to love people,
Loving people for the sake of Allah.
to love Allah and His Prophet,
To love Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than you love yourself, right? What else? Come on, help him. Very good. To hate to turn back to kufr the same way that a person would hate to be thrown into the hellfire. Jazakallah khair. And how does a person grow their love of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? In the very back, yes? I'm sorry? Well, I cannot hear, wallahi. So very good. And in order for you to know, so putting yourself in front of Allah Azza wa Jal, and in order for you to know what Allah wants, you have to go and learn about Allah Azza wa Jal, right? So by learning about about who is Allah, what are the attributes of Allah, what are Allah's abilities, what are Allah's blessings towards us, what is Allah's creation, pondering about His creation, and the same thing about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Loving him by showing that you are following his sunnah, that you are learning about who he is in the first place, who is his family and his character and all of these things. What does it mean to love someone for the sake of Allah? It's in the middle. Yep. Exactly. So you're loving someone because that person loves Allah. You're loving that person because they pray. You're loving that person because of their Quran, right? You're not loving a person because of your own desires. Okay, that guy is funny. That guy is gonna help me with my homework. That guy is gonna carry me in my video games, right? No, that's not what you're. Again, it's not haram technically, okay, but that's not what it means to love someone for the sake of Allah. Are there any questions? No questions. Okay. So I know last week I said that we're gonna do this thing where the boys go out and the girls stay here. So after looking into it, I decided I'm gonna keep the girls' Tahara section to be an online. Okay, so it will be a recording, inshallah. So when this lecture gets uploaded, you will find that I will attach a section in the fiqh portion that talks about the girls' tahara. And so you can, inshallah, within the next couple of days, look that up and listen to it. I would highly, highly recommend it for all the girls who are attending, especially those of you, around the age of 10 or above. I would highly, highly recommend that you listen to that. And if you end up having questions about that, you can come and perhaps ask maybe a teacher Fatima or something about any questions related to your tahara. So I decided to turn this fiqh section into. You have a question? Yeah.
He said that like, it's not haram to
Okay.
like, they can have you
Inshallah.
it's not loving what if what if you're doing like for the sake of Allah, like you're loving them because they can help you with and Allah wants us to be knowledgeable, so you want to
Then inshallah Allah will reward you for your intention. If that is, mashallah, you have such a pure intention for befriending someone, then inshallah, we ask Allah that it gets counted as loving for the sake of Allah. Okay. Anyways, let's move. So I decided this week we'll do just a review of all of the Tahara unit, which we've been talking about since basically lecture one. I'm not gonna dive into the details. The point here is just to kind of refresh your memory for next week, and then the actual details you can go and revisit the lectures to see what are all of these the things that pertain to Tahara. So if you remember Tahara, when we first defined it in the first lecture, we said Tahara is of two types. There is the spiritual Tahara and there is the physical Tahara. We mentioned the spiritual Tahara is Tahara from shirk. So as long as someone believes in Allah Azza wa Jal, they already have spiritual tahara. However, there is the physical tahara, which we've been focusing the majority of our time on, and that is tahara from hadath and tahara from najasa. Okay, and we mentioned that hadath, there is the minor hadath and the major hadath, right? And we defined individually what is minor hadath and what is major hadath, and what should you do for them. And we mentioned that najasa should also be removed. Najasa which is found on the body, najasa which is found on your clothing, or najasa which is especially on the area of prayer when you want to go and pray. So this is kind of the high level of everything that we learned. We learned about all of these things. And we began the Tahara unit by speaking about water. We actually spent a lot of time talking about water, right? And I'm going to summarize it in only this one slide. And we said that in order for a person to obtain Tahara, obviously a person needs to go and make wudu, right? The default when a person wants to go and pray, they go to make wudu. Well, in order for you to make wudu, you need water. Well, can I go and use any water to go and make wudu? The answer is no. I have to be aware of what is the liquid. Can I go and make wudu with orange juice? No, I cannot because it's not water. Can I make wudu with a pure water which is mixed with something? We mentioned that depends, right? So as long as this water can still be called water, as long as the three main qualities of the water have not changed, such as its smell, such that its color, such as its taste. If the and by the way, just to be very clear, again, we mentioned that there are a lot of opinions from different scholars about several of the matters which we discussed. I am not going into these differences, and I'm only just kind of giving one opinion. Okay, and if you happen to go to a different fiqh class and you learned something different, it doesn't necessarily mean that what you're learning there is wrong or whether what I'm teaching you is wrong. Okay, it's just differences of opinions. You are free to choose whichever opinion you want. So I'm just okay. Just as a kind of a heads up before we continue on. Can we save that question to the end? Okay. So we mentioned that pure water is water that is that has remained in its original state. We mentioned the original state. This is water coming from the natural sources like the rainwater, river water, spring water, sea water, and from wells as well, sort of the underground water. These are all pure water. This is all tahur. The term here is tahur water by default. I can use this water to do tahara and to remove the najasa and to remove the hadath, whether it is the minor or the major hadath, depending on the method which I am using, which we're going to summarize in a second. And we mentioned basically the general rule. You can go and watch the previous lecture for details of what happens when this mixes with the water, what happens when that mixes with the water. You can go and review that in detail. But the general rule, as long as this tahur water is still called, like I can look at it and say this is still water, it smells like water, it tastes like water, right? Then inshallah this is water that can continue to be used for tahara. And we mentioned also that in order for you, or at least nowadays this is not as relevant, but back in the day when people wanted to make wudu, they didn't have taps. They would have containers which carried those water in order for them to do their wudu. So we then talked about vessels after we spent a lot of time talking about water. We talked about vessels. So what is a vessel? A vessel is a container which is used to carry around any kind of liquid. And this also includes things like your kitchen utensils, such as your kitchen pots, your plates, your teacups, whatever it is. Okay, these are all called vessels. And we mentioned the general ruling for that is that gold and silver vessels are not allowed to be used. Okay, so you can, whatever you want to use, a plastic cup, you want to use a ceramic cup or whatever, you can go ahead and use that. But if something is made out of, as mashallah, you are so yakhi, you're so bougie and rich that you have gold cups, right, or silver, real gold, real silver cups, it is haram to use these for eating or for drinking or for cooking or for anything. Okay, even if it was just a decoration. Okay, let's say it's a normal cup but it is decorated with real gold. Okay, then this is also not allowed. However, it is if it is a cup which is colored gold or a cup that is colored with silver, then that is fine. The color is doesn't matter. I can grab a pencil crayon made out of gold, or not made, sorry, not made of gold, a golden crayon, okay, a gold colored crayon, and I can color my cup. That does not make it made out of gold, right? It just makes it a golden colored cup. Okay, so if using golden colored vessels or containers is fine, but I cannot have actual gold or silver on them. So sometimes, some of the fancy utensils we have, sometimes they sell them in the stores, like they're silver plated forks and knives and whatnot. This is not allowed. Okay, silver plated things with real silver or gold plated, this is not allowed to be used. Um, we mentioned the only exception is if a person wants to fix their cup. So if a person, for example, has the cup and it's cracked, they can use a small. They are allowed to use a small amount of silver in order for them to cover that crack. Okay, because that's something that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ used. However, it is not allowed for them to use gold. Okay, so again, if you want more details on the vessels, you can go and rewatch the lecture on the vessels. We talked about it in great detail. We then talked about the using the washroom, right? Relieving ourselves in the washroom. And we mentioned how do we clean ourselves and the etiquette of using the washroom. So we mentioned that there are two main methods for a Muslim to clean themselves up in the washroom after they're done their business. And the best one is to use is called istinja, and that is to use water. So you see, for example, in the masjid, those water hoses, or whether you are using those buckets, whatever, to pour water, that's the best way. Water is the cleanest thing that you can use to clean yourself. Okay? And if you clean yourself with water, technically you don't have to also use like a toilet paper. Okay? From a Islamic perspective. Okay? Water is enough in itself to get you into the state of tahara and to remove the najasa in the washroom, right? However, if water, let's say, was not available, or even if water is available, and let's say I only decided to use a pure object like toilet paper, for example, for 99.9% of our cases, then this is also fine. This is called al-istijmar. So sometimes we might be somewhere up on the mountains, and sometimes they have those, honestly, those nasty washrooms, right? And they don't have water in them because you're so secluded up from society. So in that case, you still have to wipe using something. And so that typically that will be some sort of paper towel or a tissue paper or whatever it is. And we also spoke about the sunnah and the etiquette of how to use the washroom. I don't know why there are so many people standing up. Okay, everybody please sit down. Everybody please sit down unless you want to just go upstairs. Okay. So we mentioned that you say Allah, you say the dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal khaba'ith. You enter with your left foot. You exit with your right. You sit down, right? You sit down when you are doing your business. You should not be standing up, right? You should not be mentioning the name of Allah in the washroom as well, or as you are doing your business. So, like I mentioned it, I remember in the lecture, even here in the masjid, sometimes, subhanAllah, like sometimes I enter the washroom to go and make wudu, and then I hear someone as they are like in the washroom stall, they are like talking in the phone and they're saying Salamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, jazakallahu khairan. Like, what are you doing? You're not allowed to be doing these kind of things. And either way, you should not be talking to your friends. This is also another problem. Talking like you both, like your friend is in the next door stall, okay, and now you're talking to them like, oh bro, what'd you do today? Well, how was your day? Or this, and then you're talking back and forth. This is also not something. This is something that is very, very disliked. So washrooms is a place where you should just be quiet, finish your business, and leave. Don't spend 45 minutes reading your shampoo bottle and bringing your phones into the washroom and things like this. This is just nasty. Okay, so that is not of the etiquette of the washroom. We also talked about sunan al-fitra, and the summary is exactly in the hadith that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ mentions, and that is that of the sunan al-fitra, just like the fitra, there is the spiritual fitra that we have in terms of our soul. There is also physical actions that we do that are part of our sunnah of our own creation, and that is to trim the mustache, letting the beard grow, right? We mentioned, so not allowing the mustache to go over your lips, right? Some scholars say that is haram. Letting the beard grow, all the scholars say that it is haram for you to shave the beard. Using the siwak, we mentioned that is a very recommended sunnah. Taking water up the nose, just like basically you would do it in the wudu. Clipping your nails, right? We should not spend more than 40 days with letting your nails grow. Again, it's nasty. Okay, it's gonna harm someone. You're gonna scratch yourself with your own nails. Washing also your knuckles, or basically any portion of the skin that has a joint in it is part of sunnah al-fitra. And again, usually that comes with just washing your hands normally. So just be a clean Muslim. Plucking the armpit hair, that should not be left more than 40 days. Shaving the pubic hair around the private part, that should not be left more than 40 days. And washing oneself with water, meaning when you go to the washroom, using water. These are all from amongst sunan al-fitra. Then that's when we entered into the different methods of tahara. And again, I'm just going to summarize everything here in like 5 minutes. So we mentioned that there are three main methods that we use for tahara, and that is wudu, that we are all aware of, ghusl, and tayammum. But every one of these methods, they have their own time and conditions for them to be used. So, for example, wudu is only done if it is in a state of minor hadath and water is available to be used, right? And so we mentioned the rulings of wudu. What are the obligatory parts of wudu? The four. So we mentioned the six obligations of wudu, right? Washing the face, washing the arms, wiping the head, washing the feet, right? And doing them in order and not leaving too much of a gap between each of these washes, right? And then we mentioned the sunnahs of wudu, washing your hands, saying Bismillah, washing your hands before the wudu, before you actually start your wudu, just cleaning your hands so that you start your wudu with clean hands, and then doing the wudu as you know it today, 3 times, washing your hands, rinsing your mouth, nose, blah 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 blah, to the end of the wudu. Okay, so this is how you should make wudu. And we also talked about wiping on the khuf, right? Wiping on the leather socks, and we mentioned that even wiping on the leather socks, the khuf, it has its own conditions. You can't just wear one whatever you want. First of all, it has to cover your entire foot, covering up to the ankle or even above the wrist. You have to be in a state of tahara when you first put them on. They cannot have any najasa on them. You should not be in a state of major hadath, and there is also a time limit, right? Remember, there's a time limit of 1 day for the person who is living locally and 3 days for the person who is traveling, right? And we mentioned similarly the rulings of the khuf. Again, according to the majority of scholars, this is not something that all the scholars agreed upon. Especially one of the madhahib, they completely reject wiping on the socks or on the socks completely. However, three of the other madhahib, they accept this concept of wiping on the socks. So inshallah, there is no issue. If you are someone who has no issue accepting that opinion, then you have no then you can go ahead and wipe on your socks as long as your socks don't have holes on them, okay, such that they are showing the parts which should be washed, right, like your toes, the top of your foot, your ankles. Those socks are not allowed to be wiped upon. But however, if it is one of those, thick enough socks, you don't see your foot, it's long enough, it's covering up your ankles, then inshallah, according to three of the mainstream madahib, you are allowed to apply the same rulings of the khuf on the socks. And we mentioned also the rulings of wiping on the cast, right? Cast on or a band-aid or whatnot, right? So if it has severe repercussions for your health, if like the doctor said, if someone broke their arm or something and they put a cast and the doctor said, don't take off the cast until your arm heals up, then for wudu, now you have the option to now wipe on the cast. You don't have to take off your cast because that's going to cause severe effects on your health. And we mentioned also wiping on, so again, we talked about all of these in a lot of details. You can revisit them for more details. We also defined the major hadath, what is ghusl and what is major hadath, and when should you have to, when do you have to perform ghusl, right? So we mentioned major hadath. For example, for the ladies, it comes in the times of, when you are on your period, or when after the period of time after the lady gives birth to a newborn. And for men, we mentioned that in details last week, right? Releasing of certain fluids that will cause you to be in a state of major hadath, or just kind of, again, private adult relationships, for the lack of you get what I'm saying. So that counts as major hadath. And if a person is in a state of major hadath, they have to perform ghusl. Doing wudu is not sufficient for them. How do you perform ghusl? The 2-second summary is that you have to pour water on all of your body, from top to bottom, and you have to run your fingers through your hair and rinse your nose and your ears and your mouth as well. Okay, this is how you perform ghusl. However, the sunnah of performing ghusl, of course, we mentioned it, is to say Bismillah, to wash your hands 3 times, to wash to wash your private parts, and then to make wudu as if you are going to as if you are going to do salah, as if you are going to pray salah. Then then washing, then running your water through your hair 3 times, okay, and all the way down to your roots, and then pouring water on the right side of your body, pouring water on the left side of your body. Also, it should take a few minutes only. It should not be taking hours and decades for you to finish your ghusl and you're contemplating your life decisions in the shower. Okay, you should not be wasting water. And the last one that we talked about recently was tayammum. We said, let's say there is no water for me to use at all, anywhere, nowhere close. I have no access to it, or it's too dangerous for me to use that water. And it's in a time of prayer, and it's a prayer time, and I looked for water and I couldn't find it. Then I can perform tayammum, right? And we talked about it in a lot of details. And I mentioned that the tayammum has a lot of differences amongst the scholars, so you may have learned something different. But we mentioned that you basically taking both of your hands, wipe up, striking them against a surface. Ideally, that surface should be a surface made out of earth, like soil or sand or dust or something. But even if that is not available, according to scholars, inshallah, you can also use any other surface like the wall or the floor or whatever, right? And you just simply wipe your face once and wipe your hands once, and that's your tayammum is done. Tayammum is broken as soon as you find water, or you are able to use that water again. Now, what happens with your state of tahara when you did tayammum? If you found water before salah, during salah, after salah, go and revisit back the lesson of tayammum. We talked about that in a lot of details. And the most recent lesson that we talked about was removing the najasa. We mentioned najasa, there's two of them. There's inherent najasa, accidental najasa. Inherent najasa, this is permanently najas, like dog saliva. There's nothing you can do to make dog saliva pure. Or a pig. Pig is always najas. There's nothing you can do to wash the pig to make it pure. Never. So that's always, always najas. However, there are some substances that become najas because another najasa came upon them, like your clothing. Your clothing by default are not najas, but if najasa came upon them, then your clothing become najas. Accidental najasa can be purified. How can it be purified? Well, it depends on the najasa. If the najasa is a dog saliva, we mentioned this is the heaviest degree of najasa, and you need to wash it 7 times with water and once with dirt. And I mentioned today that many scholars they say that if you throw your whatever clothing that has the dog saliva into the washing machine, mashallah, it puts it, it rinses it a lot of times and it uses soap as well. So that is, inshallah, equivalent to rinsing it 7 times and once with dirt, according to scholars. And we also mentioned that there's, if the najasa of the baby, the urine of a baby boy who is still breastfeeding, okay? So that najasa is the lightest type of najasa. Why? Because you can simply take some water and sprinkle it, and that's enough to remove the najasa. You don't actually have to take your whole clothing and just throw it into the washing machine. Okay, and there are other filthy substances, whether that is whatever that najasa might be. Okay, that najasa is removed by, first of all, removing the physical najasa first if it exists, and then pouring and then continuing to pour pure water, until the traces of that najasa is gone completely. And alhamdulillah, I was able to summarize everything in the last 20 minutes. I don't think we're going to have time to take questions right now, but inshallah, maybe after the salah, we will continue taking some questions, and then we'll continue with the seerah. And inshallah, so as usual, we're going to go up, pray asr, come back down, sit down immediately, and we're just going to continue so that we finish on time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. We'll see you after the salah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So as mentioned in the lecture, inshallah, this section for the next 30 minutes or so, we will be discussing the Tahara for girls. So last week we did it for the boys, today we're doing it for the girls. And therefore, if you are a boy who is watching this recording, I would suggest that you skip this section until the video continues back in the actual lecture. And similarly, if we have any girls who are a little too young, I would suggest that you just skip this section. Inshallah, this is not relevant to you as of yet. So today we are going to discuss a very important topic regarding Tahara for the girls, and that brings us to the topic of Hayd. So, Hayd is a term that is found in the Arabic language, and it is also found in the Quran and in the Sunnah. So, Hayd is a word, if we were to open the Arabic dictionary, it comes from the verb haba. Okay, haba, for example, haba al-wadi. So, the valley has been flooded. So, Hayd is actually coming from the word to flood. However, when we talk about Hayd in an Islamic context, Allah Azza wa Jalla, for example, says, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ. In the Sunnah as well, many ahadith, they mention this word hayd. This is referring to the blood which is discharged at certain times during the month from the uterus, and it is happening, due to, of course, the natural function of the female body. However, it is important to mention that this is not related to childbirth. So there is a certain type of blood that comes out during childbirth, and we're going to talk about it, inshallah, towards the end. So this is what is in common terms referred to as the period, the monthly period of a woman. Now, the hayd, the duration of the hayd, it can last, it does have a minimum period. So scholars, they mentioned that the minimum duration of hayd is 1 day and 1 night, i.e. 24 hours, and can continue up to 15 days. However, on average, most females, they experience hayd for a duration of around 6 or 7 days. Now, what about the blood that is less than 24, that flows only for a short duration of time, less than 24 hours, or the blood that continues after 15 days. We're going to talk about that, inshallah, in this section. But for now, let's just focus on on the blood that fits this description that's on the screen. So it's a blood that appears, that continues to flow from between 24 hours, usually up to 15 days, usually around 6 or 7 days. And this tends to happen to females. This process of, the monthly period. It usually starts around the age of 9 years old, and it continues up to around the age of 50 years old. However, these are numbers which are not necessarily set in stone. This is the common range. There are rare cases where certain girls, they begin uh, more or less than 9 years old, and certain older women who continue their monthly cycle for, more or less than 50 years old. But this is around the estimate. So, um, if you are someone who is on the younger end of the spectrum, you're around 9, 10 years old, and you haven't yet experienced hayd, then this is good education for you to have. Because now, inshallah, if you end up seeing blood at some point, and it resembles the qualities of the blood of the menses, the blood of the hayd, and you observe that this is flowing for more than 24 hours, then this is an indication that you are now in the state of hayd. And I would suggest you go and ask your mom or your sister, or a female Islamic teacher of yours, to give you a little bit more details on how you can determine what is this blood that is flowing. Usually it's compared to normal blood, it tends to be darker in color and usually thicker as well. And sometimes it could have even a smell. But either way, you can ask these people and inshallah get a little bit more details. So we mentioned that hayd starts, you know, begins more than 24 hours and can last up to 15 days. How do I know that my hayd has ended? How do I know that, how does a woman know that her hayd has ended? There are two signs, two indications that a woman can use to know whether her hayd has ended. Number one, if she notices that the bleeding has stopped. So, of course, throughout the bleeding period, you are going to have, certain uh, hygiene practices to kind of, keep yourself clean and to determine, whether the blood is still flowing. So if you start to realize or to notice or observe that there is no more blood that is coming out, that when the cloth is coming out, it's clean, it doesn't have any signs of blood or discharge, then this is one indication that the hayd has ended. And if you observe this, then you can take this as a sign, inshallah, that your hayd has ended. Another sign that you can use, um, and this is a more visible sign that you can use as well, is that at the end of the hayd, at the end of the menses, usually there is a clear white discharge that comes out, and this is referred to in the Sunnah as al-qassa al-bayda, al-qassatu al-bayda, and this is a sign of tahara, or of tuhur, sorry. That means that the hayd basically has now ended, and this is of course taken from the hadith from the mother of Alqama, who was, a servant of Aisha radiallahu anha, uh, that she heard Aisha radiallahu anha telling the ladies that do not لا تعجلن حتى ترين القصة البيضاء. Do not hasten, meaning don't hasten to go start praying and start fasting. We're going to talk about that in a second. Don't rush to go start praying and start fasting until you see al-qassatu al-bayda, until you see this white fluid coming out. once you experience any one of these two indicators, then this is an indication that your hayd has ended. However, hayd is a major hadath, and we mentioned this previously in the unit of ghusl. So therefore, once you notice that the hayd has ended, now you have to go and perform ghusl before now whatever was prohibited for you now is open for you to do. And once again, this is taken from the Hadith. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he says, وَلَا يَحِلُ لَهَا إِذَا رَأَتِ الطُّهْرَ سَاعَةً إِلَّا أَن تَغْتَسِلْ. So basically, as soon as you see, don't delay it too much. As soon as you see the signs of purity or of the ending of the hayd, then go and perform ghusl. Don't delay it. Now, um, sometimes a woman might notice a different kind of fluid that is coming out, and it is sometimes kind of like a muddy brown or a bit of a yellowish discharge, and it might come out at different times for different reasons. So what do I do? What do you do in this case? Do you consider this as haid, or what is this exactly? Well, it depends. If this fluid is coming out during the regular menses cycle, um, during the time where you would normally experience your haid, and especially if it contains a little bit of blood, then this is an indicator that you are in a state of haid now. However, if it is coming before or after your haid is ended, so if you've noticed that your haid is ended and then, whatever, a day later or whatever it is, you notice this this kind of fluid coming out, then this is not hayd, because your hayd has already ended. This is what we call istihada. Now, what is istihada? We're going to talk about that in a lot of details in a second, but just know for now that this is not the same blood that is coming in hayd, meaning you still continue to pray, you still continue to fast. However, it is najis. Istihada is still najis, meaning as long as it is flowing, you should be washing it off. And it does break your wudu, so you need to redo your wudu. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more details in a second. So while a woman is in the state of hayd, what is what becomes prohibited for her? There are a number of things that become prohibited for a woman who is in a state of hayd or menses or in her monthly period. What are they? According to the Quran and the Sunnah, we get to learn several things are prohibited. They are haram. You cannot do them. So you cannot think to yourself that, oh, but I want to be so pious and I want to become a pious woman and I want to continue to pray and fasting. If you want to be a pious woman, you should stop praying and you should stop fasting, because this is what the Quran and what Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us. So things of the things that are prohibited for a woman in her hayd, number one is prayer. A woman is not allowed to pray during her hayd. And this is found in the hadith of Fatima binti Abi Hubaysh radiallahu anha, where he tells her, فَإِذَا أَقْبَلَتِ الْحَيْضَ فَاتْرُكِ الصَّلَاةِ, that as soon as you encounter hayd, you have to leave your prayer. And in another hadith also found in Sahih Bukhari, this is a little bit of a longer hadith, he asked a number of ladies, أَلَيْسَ إِذَا حَاضَتْ لَمْ تُصَلِّ وَلَمْ تَصُمْ قُلْنَ بَلَى. So he was asking them as part of so there was a whole conversation going on. Part of the conversation, he was saying to the ladies, he was speaking to a group of ladies, isn't it true that when a woman enters her hayd, she does not pray and she does not fast? And so they said, yes, that is true. And therefore, from this we learn praying and fasting is not allowed for a woman during her hayd. And we're going to talk about, a few scenarios in the next slide, inshallah. But let's just continue the list. Number 3, tawaf. So a lady that goes to Mecca and she wants to perform Umrah or she's going to perform Hajj, Tawaf is prohibited for this woman, although the remainder of the manasik, of the acts of Umrah or Hajj are actually allowed for her. It's only the Tawaf that is prohibited. And we also learned this from the hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha. I'll just paraphrase the hadith, a little bit of a longer hadith. So one time she went with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She was intending to perform Hajj, but one day Prophet Muhammad SAW entered upon her as you know they were during the Hajj, and she was crying. فقال ما يبكيك? What is making you cry? So she says, لوددت والله أني لم أحج العام. So I wish, she says, she didn't explain why, she was just crying, and she says, I wish I didn't go to perform Hajj this year. And so Prophet Muhammad SAW, subhanAllah, being the intelligent man, wise person he is, he figured it out. And so he asks her, لعلك نفست. Perhaps you have entered your state of hayd, your period. And so she says yes. So he calms her down and he says this is something natural. Allah Azza wa Jalla has put it down in the women, the daughters of Adam. Uh, so he tells her then, فَافْعَلِي مَا يَفْعَلُ الْحَاجِ. Do everything that a normal person performing Hajj does, غَيْرَ أَن لَا تَطُوفِ بِالْبَيْتِ حَتَّى تَطْهُرِي. Except do not go and perform tawaf until you are, free of your hayd. And this is actually somewhat related to the fourth point, and that is holding or touching the mushaf. Okay, holding or touching the mushaf. But however, I do want, because of course Allah Azza wa Jalla, the evidence for this is the verse of where Allah Azza wa Jalla says, لا يمسه إلا المطهرون, that this book, the Quran, is not touched except by those who are pure. And a woman in her hayd, she is not pure, so she should not be touched. She should not touch the physical Quran. However, this is only talking about the touching with your bare skin. So a woman, for example, she can have a barrier between her skin and the Quran, allowing her to touch the Quran. So perhaps a woman can be wearing gloves, and even though she is in a state of hayd, that would still allow her to touch the Quran. Or sometimes a woman can use a tafsir book. So there are these books that have the tafsir of the Quran in them, and they do have Quran in them, kind of like in the small top right or top left corner, but the majority of the page is tafsir, and the actual Quran is small. That is also allowed for the women to touch, because this is not touching a Quran, this is touching a tafsir book. Okay. Um, Now, this is in terms of touching the Quran. What about reciting the Quran, reading the Quran? Perhaps you're sitting at home and you want to recite Quran to your sister or to your mom, to your dad, whatever. Maybe you have an online Quran class, but you are in a state of hayd. Is it permissible for you to recite the Quran? The answer for this is yes, there is no problem in a woman in her hayd to recite her Quran. And actually, the evidence for this is found in the same hadith that I just mentioned to you about Tawaf, where Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells Aisha radiallahu anha, do everything that a person who goes and performs Hajj does. Just don't do Tawaf. Now, a person who performs Hajj typically picks up the Quran and reads the Quran. This is, you have a lot of time in Hajj. So typically a person reads Quran. So had he wanted to warn her, he would have told her, hey, watch out, don't do tawaf, and also don't recite the Quran, because that's not allowed for you. So, but he didn't say this. He only said, don't do tawaf. And therefore, if you are in a state of hayd, you can recite the Quran. You can read the Quran from memory. You can read it off a screen, but you cannot touch the physical Quran with your bare hands. You can, however, have a barrier. So I hope that point is clear. Point number 5, it is also prohibited for a woman in her hayd to enter and stay in a masjid. To enter and stay in the masjid. And the evidence for this is also a hadith where Aisha radiallahu anha, she was in a state of hayd. And Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was sitting in the masjid. And of course, recall back in the day, the house of the house of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was literally next door. Like the curtain, he opens the curtain, he walks into the masjid from his home. So his home is right next, literally next door to the masjid. And so one day, as he was sitting in the masjid, and Aisha radiallahu anha is sitting on the other side of the curtain in his home, and he basically asked Aisha to hand him something while he was sitting in the masjid. So what did she say? She basically said, "How can I give you this when I am in a state of hayd?" And this is where we learn that a woman in a state of hayd, she should not enter the masjid, because Aisha radiallahu anha, she could have just walked in and given him whatever he was asking for. But however, she said, "I am still in a state of hayd. I cannot enter the masjid." But then Prophet Muhammad ﷺ responds to her. He said, you're in a state of hayd. Your hand is not in a state of hayd. Meaning, look, you cannot enter the masjid, but you can just reach your hand into the masjid and give me whatever I need to, or whatever I need. So reaching out is fine, but entering is not. And if entering is not allowed, then definitely staying in a masjid is not allowed either. Um, and similarly, in terms of passing by into the masjid. So, like, let's say you don't want to stay in the masjid, but you're just walking through the masjid, walking through one side, exiting out the other side. If there is any risk of contamination, then you are also not allowed to pass through the masjid. Point number 6, also for married ladies. Um, it is prohibited to have any kind of, private adult relationships. You know what I mean? Because Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْمَحِيضِ, they ask you about the mahid. قُلْ هُوَ أَذًى فَاعْتَزِلُوا النِّسَاءَ فِي الْمَحِيضِ. Do not approach them. وَلَا تَقْرَبُوهُنَّ حَتَّى يَطْهُرْنَ. Do not approach them, in that kind of sense, until they are free from their hayd. And in a hadith found in Sahih Muslim, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, "You can do everything." He's telling the men, "You can do everything." Sorry, he's telling them basically, "You can do everything you want, except for private adult relationships." Okay. Point number 7, again for married ladies, it is actually prohibited to have a divorce. So it's prohibited for a husband to divorce his wife while she is in a state of hayd. Allah Azza wa Jalla says in the Quran, يا أيها النبي إذا طلقتم النساء فطلقوهن لعدتهن وأحصوا العدة. That if you want to divorce women, there's a period of time where it is allowed for you to divorce them, and a period of time where you should not be divorcing them. And there is also the famous incident where the son of Umar al-Khattab, Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, one time he divorced his wife while she was in a state of hayd. So she was in a state of hayd, he divorces her. His And then Umar al-Khattab, he informs Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he asks him, what do we do? So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he orders him, "Murhu falyuraji'ha." Go and order him to take his wife back. He's not allowed to divorce her. ثُمَّ لْيُمْسِكْهَا حَتَّى تَطْهُرْ. And let him keep his wife until she is in a state of tahara. ثم تحيض ثم تطهر ثم إن شاء أمسك بعد ذلك وإن شاء طلق. Once she is free of her haid, if he wishes to keep her, he can keep her. If he wishes to divorce her, he can divorce her. But that's after her haid is done. Meaning, a woman, it is prohibited for a man to divorce his wife while she is in a state of haid. So these are the prohibitions of haid. Once you finish your haid, once you notice that your haid is now passed by, and you finished performing your ghusl, all of these prohibitions become allowed again. So now you can pray, you can fast, you can do tawaf, etc., etc. Now, just to clarify a little bit more about the prayer and the fasting, because that always usually tends to cause some confusion. A woman who is in her haid does not have to make up the prayer. So we just mentioned in the previous slide, prayer is prohibited. It's haram. It's not allowed for a woman in her haid to perform prayers. Okay, so you don't pray for 7 days or whatnot. That's 35 prayers. Do you have to make up 35 prayers after your haid? Alhamdulillah, you do not need to do this. You don't have to make up any prayers during your haid. However, if it's in the month of Ramadan, for example, and you miss days of fasting because you are in haid, those days of fasting must be made up. So let's say in the month of Ramadan, you enter your state of haid and you end up missing 6 or 7 days of Ramadan because of your haid. Um, once once you're haid, once you are in a state of Tahara again, and once the month of Ramadan is done, you have to make up those days. Okay, so this is important to understand. Prayers you don't make up. Fasting, yes, you do make up. Uh, so let's just explore the two common cases, just to clarify this a little bit more. So let's say the prayer time enters. Okay, so let's say it's Dhuhr time now. Dhuhr adhan has just been given. Uh, and you get up, you make wudu, you pray your Dhuhr prayer, you finish everything. And before Asr prayer enters, you enter your state of hayd. Your period begins. In that case, you don't have to worry about anything, okay? Because you already prayed Dhuhr in its time in a state of Tahara. And when Asr enters, you're in a state of hayd. You don't have to make up the Asr prayer once you miss it because you're in a state of hayd. You're given that excuse. However, what happens, let's say, again, same scenario. Dhuhr prayer now enters. But before you can go and make wudu and offer dhuhr prayer, your state of hayd begins. What do you do in this case? There is actually a little bit of a difference between the scholars, and they kind of divide into half. So, two of the mainstream madhahib, they tell you that no, you don't need to make it up, and the other two madhahib say no, you have to make this up. To be on the safer side, and this is what I would suggest and recommend, you have to make up this prayer. So again, let's just rerun the scenario. You're currently in a state of tahara. Dhuhr prayer now enters, and you say, oh, I need to go and make wudu and pray dhuhr. Before you can make wudu and pray dhuhr, you enter your state of hayd. You haven't prayed the dhuhr prayer. So what should you do? After your hayd ends a week later or whatever, however long later, you should, and after you finish your ghusl and you're in a state of tahara, you should make wudu and you should pray qada, make up the dhuhr prayer, which you didn't pray at the beginning of your hayd. So I would recommend you replay this section if you need to, just so that this portion is clear to you, just so that you are on the safer side. This is in terms of the prayer. Now, what about fasting? If you are fasting, whether it's the month of Ramadan or any other day, and your period begins, this immediately nullifies your fast. Your entire fast is invalid. And so and even let's say you fasted the long days of Ramadan, a long day. You fasted from 5 a.m. all the way to whatever, 9 p.m. Just 10 minutes before Maghrib prayer, your hayd begins. Tough luck. You have to make up the fast. The fast is not accepted. And that is simply how it is. And this is a fast that has to be made up, as I had mentioned previously. And similarly, towards the end of the period. So this also sometimes tends to cause confusion, but it's actually very simple if you think about it. So let's say you are on your seventh day or eighth, sixth, seventh, whatever, on your final day of your period, okay? And you're expecting yourself to become very soon in a state of Tahara. If you notice the signs of the end of Hayd, the two things which I mentioned in the previous slide, if you noticed one of these two signs indicating the end of your Hayd before the Fajr adhan has entered, meaning before you have to start fasting, then you can fast that day, inshallah, and there is no problem, and you don't have to make up anything. However, if you do not notice these signs of ending the hayd, you don't see any of the signs where the hayd has ended, and then Fajr adhan is given, and you still didn't notice any of the signs, then tough luck. This fast is not accepted. You cannot fast this day. It's an invalid fast. You have to make it up. Even again, let's say Fajr Adhan is given 5 minutes later, 5 minutes after the Fajr Adhan enters, you notice that you are now, your hayd has ended. Again, tough luck. This fast is invalid, and this is a fast that has to be made up. So hopefully this matter is clear. Now I want to go back to something which I had mentioned earlier at the start, something that is called istihada. So we mentioned that the period blood typically starts, it lasts between 24 hours to 15 days, depending on, different women and their bodies. Okay. What if the blood flows for less than 24 hours? Or what if the blood flows beyond 15 days? Or what if you notice blood that's not related to your monthly cycle? It's just coming at a random time in the month for whatever reason with some, whether it is health reasons or something else. You just noticed blood randomly flowing and it's not in your usual time of the period. This blood, we do not call it hayd. This is not a state of hayd. We call it now istihada. Istihada. This is very important to understand because the rulings are different. Okay? And usually the blood of istihada is lighter in color and thinner compared to the blood of hayd. Um, and as I mentioned, if the blood lasts less than 24 hours, then this is typically istihada blood. Or if it continues to flow. So let's say your period lasts for so long that you're on the 15th day and the blood is still not stopping, then after the 15th day, you can consider any blood after this is istihada. Okay? So any blood that flows after 15 days of hayd is no longer hayd. This is now called istihada. What is the ruling on istihada and why do I say that it is different from hayd? Because unlike hayd, a woman who is in the state of istihada, she can still pray, she can still fast, touch the Quran, do all of the prohibitions which we mentioned about because she is not in, again, I'll repeat it, she is not in a state of hayd, she is in a state of istihada. However, this blood that comes out in istihada is still najas, and it is something that breaks the wudu. So what should a woman in her istihada do? Very simple. She should wash her private part and put on a pad and whatever hygiene products, and then perform wudu and pray her prayer. And she has to repeat this for every prayer, every time. So let's say a woman is in a state of istihada. When dhuhr time enters, she, goes to the washroom, cleans herself, performs wudu, prays dhuhr. Few hours later, asr time enters. Same thing. She goes to the washroom, cleans herself, performs wudu, and prays asr prayer. And you should and that woman should perform wudu for each prayer until, of course, the istihada ends, and you would notice that the blood stops flowing. Now, one of the most common challenges that women face in this case, okay, I understand what is hayd, I understand what is istihada. How can I tell the difference? How do I know is this blood that's currently how would you know that the blood that is currently flowing, is it hayd or is it istihada? Well, we're going to mention three different cases. The first one is the easiest one. So let's say you have a regular, healthy cycle for your period. You know that at a certain time of the month, you enter the state, you start, your menses period begins for a period of 6 or 7 days, whatever. Okay? Any blood that you encounter during this period, this is hayd. This is your period. This is your menses. This is normal. And any blood, therefore, that is outside your regular cycle is called istihada. This is very clear. This is the easiest case to understand. Now, let's say there is a woman who doesn't have a regular cycle for her menses. And subhanAllah, some ladies, they suffer from this, where she doesn't have a regular cycle. However, the hayd blood is distinct from her istihada blood. Okay? So she notices, for example, that at certain times in the month, the blood is coming thick, it's dark in color, maybe perhaps has a smell. And at other times in the month, the blood is coming lighter in color, uh, thinner in texture and whatnot. So, based on the information that we discussed, you would be able to distinguish, okay, this thick blood is hayd. I'm in the state of that you are currently in the state of hayd, and this other blood is istihada. So you should use your judgment to recognize whether you are in a state of hayd or whether you are in a state of istihada. The third case is for a woman who doesn't have a regular cycle, number one, and number two, she can't distinguish her hayd and istihada blood are very similar, similar in color, similar in texture, similar in everything. What should this lady do? Then in that case, subhanAllah, this is how Allah Azza wa Jal makes Islam easy for everybody. Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. You do whatever you can. You put in the maximum effort, and at the end of the day, you hope for the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. So what should you do in this case? A woman should follow the cycle of the majority of other women. So perhaps you should see what is the cycle for her mother or her sister or her relatives, or just in general, what is this menses cycle, what does the hayd cycle look like for the majority of other women, which is, as I mentioned, typically 6 or 7 days, and simply follow their cycle. And khalas, just say that whatever blood that woman should say, whatever blood she sees during that duration, during that cycle, then she will consider this as hayd. And any blood that she sees outside that cycle, that blood will be considered as istihada. Last but not least, and I apologize, I know this is a lengthy topic, but it's important. The last one, which is not as relevant to many of the people who are listening to this right now, but it still has to be mentioned, and that is called nifas. So there is a type of blood that is called nifas as well. And nifas is a special type of discharge, and it only comes out when a woman gives birth. So only when a woman gives birth to a newborn, she is now in a state of nifas. Now, we're not going to go into the details of nifas because, number one, the majority of the listeners are not at that age yet, obviously. And number two, for the reason that nifas simply has the same rulings of hayd. The blood that comes out in nifas has the same characteristics of the blood that comes out during hayd, and it has the exact same rulings of hayd, meaning a woman in her nifas She does not pray, she does not fast, she does not touch the Quran, she does not do tawaf, etc., etc. The only difference between nifas and hayd, of course, number one is that it's during childbirth, and that nifas, unlike hayd, we said hayd, the blood should be flowing for at least 24 hours. Nifas does not have a minimum period for obvious reasons, because a woman is bleeding as soon as she is giving birth. And the maximum limit, so the maximum limit of hayd we said was 15 days, and anything after that is istihada. Nifas has an upper limit, has a bigger limit, and the nifas has a maximum limit of up to 40 days. And so the woman remains in a state of nifas for up to 40 days. If she continues to bleed more than 40 days, this is now considered as istihada, and the rulings of istihada we just mentioned, and so she would apply that. There's one tiny last detail that is mentioned in the books of fiqh, which we should mention. Sometimes the woman does not successfully deliver her newborn, and she suffers from a miscarriage. So sometimes she drops her baby in the 5th month, 6th month. She does not continue to the 9th month for whatever reasons. However, she still experiences bleeding, of course, because she still gave birth to something. So the question here is, this blood that comes out, is it considered to be, is this lady now in a state of nifas, or is this blood that is something else? The answer to this is very simple. If this fetus has features of a human being, meaning perhaps yes, it's a miscarriage, perhaps yes, it's not alive, but it still has, the doctors look at it and they still see there's what looks like an eye, like hands and legs, and it looks like a human being, then this blood is nifas, because the soul has been blown into this fetus, but it did not make it through. So this woman is in a state of nifas. However, if this fetus does not have human features, so it does not have what I just described, like, the doctors look at it and they still cannot tell the features of this fetus, then this blood is not considered to be nifas. And so this woman should, even though she is bleeding, she would consider it basically like istihada. She would clean up the blood. She would continue to pray. She would continue to fast and to do everything else. Now, how on earth would a woman know um, whether her fetus has human features or not? We learn from different places and verses and a hadith as well that human features typically appear in the fetus at around 81 days of pregnancy. Okay, around 81 days of pregnancy, so around 3 months. So 81 days or a little bit more than this, that's the point at which the human features begin to appear in the fetus. So if she goes past, 81 to 90 days or so, then she is in a state of nifas. If she ends up, whether giving birth or giving him or having a miscarriage, she's in a state of nifas. If she gives a miscarriage, if she suffers from miscarriage before 81 days pass, then she is not in a state of nifas, and the typical rulings of istihada would apply upon her. And with that said, we now reach the end of the topic of the girls' Tahara. Um, I hope this was beneficial for you, and and I would understand that some of us might think that, oh, this might be a very awkward topic, and we should not be talking about these things, and why is this being discussed? Well, in matters like this, okay, there's a phrase that the female Sahabas used to use whenever they wanted to ask Prophet Muhammad ﷺ questions about their deen that in typical cases might be embarrassing to ask and might be embarrassing to talk about, but they know that this is the matters of deen. So they would go to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and they would say, Ya Rasulullah, la haya'a fi din. that, Ya Rasulullah, in matters of deen, we cannot be embarrassed to ask you these questions. And so basically Prophet Muhammad ﷺ at that point would realize that, oh, they're about to ask questions which, if it wasn't in the context of the deen and the religion, it would be perhaps inappropriate and embarrassing and awkward. Like, why are they talking about this? But when it comes to the matter of deen, we cannot have embarrassment. We cannot have awkwardness. We have to understand our deen. We have to understand our tahara in order for us to make sure that our salahs are being accepted, our fasting is being accepted, and our deeds are being accepted. So I hope this was all clear to all of us. If anyone has any questions about any of the topics that you discussed, please bring them up. We will get these answered to you in the masjid. I will have a female teacher, a qualified female teacher who will be there, inshallah, in the masjid to answer any of your questions regarding haid or istihada or nifas or whatever. Um, so there are no silly or dumb questions in this regard. Again, this is pertaining to your tahara, so it is very important. So please do not hesitate to bring up any questions to us. With that said, جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. And inshallah, this recording will cut back to the lecture um, in the masjid basement.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As you heard in the announcement, they have a lecture at 5 o'clock, so I have to finish up the seerah very quickly. But just as a reminder, before I wrap up, because I know I'm going to forget this at the end, next week, Kahoot, okay? Review session, so bring your phones with you and get ready, inshallah, for the review session. As for the girls, we said that there will be a recording on removing najasa for girls only. The girls' tahara portion will be recorded online in the recording of this lecture that's being recorded right now. I will basically add it at the end of the fiqh section, okay? So, continuing where we left off in the seerah, we were talking that we said that Prophet Muhammad SAW, he arrived at a level that is called Sidratul Muntaha. Sidratul Muntaha. So he ascended up after meeting Ibrahim alayhi salam and seeing him in the Bayt al-Ma'mur. He ascended up until he arrived at Sidratul Muntaha. And now he gets several descriptions. So this is a tree that we don't really know about, but it is a tree. So sidra is coming from the shajara to sidr. There is a tree in our world called tree of as-sidr, and basically it's kind of like has like very wide branches and has very sweet fruits. So Sidratul Muntaha is a very massive tree that's up there in the heavens, and the leaves of it are very massive. They're ears of the elephants, as Prophet Muhammad ﷺ described them, and they have fruits like basically like big barrels. Okay, it has big fruits and it has a lot of colorful insects that are flying around it, made out of gold, and it has a lot of unique colors that are covering it that even Prophet Muhammad SAW, he himself, he did not know how to describe. So it's very interesting, and it shows us that there are actually colors beyond the spectrum of this world. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he saw these colors, and he doesn't know what these colors are, but it's like covering the tree, and the tree kept changing and molding and whatnot until you cannot describe it. So it's a tree up there, but it's not the same as the tree that we have in our world. It's just a bark and branches and green leaves and whatnot. It's a tree that's continuously changing and dynamic. So you can't really, describe it. And it's called Sidratul Muntaha. Al Muntaha means at the very end. It's called at the very end because there is literally no creation above Sidratul Muntaha. Like above Sidratul Muntaha, there's nothing. There's no angels, no nothing. Only Allah Azza wa Jal is above Sidrat al-Muntaha, above the seventh heaven. And it is mentioned in a hadith that everything begins from this tree that is brought down to our world. So things like Allah's mercy, Allah's rain, rain from Allah Azza wa Jal, things that come from Allah Azza wa Jal to us begin from Sidrat al-Muntaha and they come down. And everything that is raised up to Allah Azza wa Jal, so things like dua, things like good deeds and whatnot. I'll just finish with this. Things like good deeds and whatnot, they are raised up and it gets absorbed by Sidratul Muntaha. So this was at Sidrat al-Muntaha. And we also get a description. We'll take questions after, inshallah. So there were also four rivers that he saw coming out of Sidrat al-Muntaha. And he says, I saw two rivers. Two of them were hidden and two of them were visible to me. So I asked Jibreel, what are these rivers? And he told me that two hidden rivers are rivers of Jannah. And the two visible rivers are the Nile and the Euphrates River, meaning in Arabic, An-Nil wal-Furat, the Nahr al-Nil and Nahr al-Furat. He saw them up there. Now, what does this really mean? We don't really know because none of us have actually seen Sidrat al-Muntaha. Some scholars, they would tell you that through Allah's miracle, that those rivers, they start from up there and now we see them in our world. Others say that no, it just means that these are very blessed rivers, whatever that really means. And it is also mentioned that at Sidratul Muntaha, Jibreel basically came back to his original form. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ only saw Jibreel twice in his original form. One time at the cave of Hira when he first descended to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ at the first time during the revelation, and the second time is here in the Isra and Mi'raj. We mentioned, of course, Jibreel has a very massive form. He has 600 wings. He's very, very big and massive in size. Now, after Sidratul Muntaha, here is where we don't really get a lot of details, but we are told in one narration that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he continued to ascend until he arrived at a level where he could hear the writing of the pen. The writing of the pen. Now, what is this pen and who is writing it? This is the pen that is writing Allah's qadr. Okay? And since this is a creation of Allah, Allah can simply tell the pen to write and it does not need someone to write it. Okay? So this is subhanAllah, a pen that is writing, most likely writing it by itself. And it is Allahu Alam what it is really writing. But some scholars say that this is the qadr which the angels receive from Allah Azza wa Jal and they make it true in this world. And then after this, he continued until this was now the main event of Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, and that is the private meeting with Allah Azza wa Jal. Did Prophet Muhammad ﷺ see Allah Azza wa Jal? No, he did not. He did not. Okay, there was a curtain made out of nur that is blocking him from seeing Allah Azza wa Jal. So he spoke to Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, even though this meeting was the main event of Al-Isra al-Mi'raj, the reality is we actually don't know anything about this meeting. We have no idea what was discussed and what happened up there and what he saw and all of these things. We have no idea what the discussion was. And sometimes you might find here certain narrations that say that, oh, the Prophet said this and Allah said this and they had a back and forth. Some say that at-tahiyyatu lillah, this was when it came down. This is all not accurate. So the reality is we have no idea what took place in that meeting. However, we do know that around this time period, there were three things that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ received. One of them is the endings of Surah Al-Baqarah. The last two verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, Amana Rasulu, till the very end of the surah. These have a special status in the Quran because they were given from up there during Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. And these are verses that all of us should be reciting every night before you go to bed. You should try to memorize them if you don't have them memorized. Or if you don't have them memorized, just open up the Quran and read them off. But make sure you read them before you go to bed because Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, whoever recites these verses before going to bed, then it is enough for him. And he also received the promise that anyone who does not associate partners with Allah Azza wa Jal will be eligible for Allah's forgiveness. And the last one is the one that we are all aware of, the 50 obligatory prayers. 50, not 5, 50. So initially, there were 50 prayers. And then at this point, this is when Prophet Muhammad ﷺ began descending down and he ran into Musa alayhi salam. Musa asks Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, what did you receive from Allah? And he says, I received 50 daily prayers. Musa says, look, I got experience with the Banu Israel. I got experience with these people. I know that your ummah will not be able to pray 50 times a day. And subhanAllah, imagine what a life you would live if you prayed 50 times a day. That's like every 20 minutes they got to do an adhan and iqamah here up in the masjid. Good luck going to school. Good luck sleeping. Good luck doing anything in your life. Your whole life is not going to be praying. So Musa says, this is going to be too much on your people. Go back up to Allah Azza wa Jalla and ask them to reduce it. So now the narrations go, I'll just quickly summarize. So he mentions that he went back and forth up and down several times. Every time he goes, it gets reduced by a little bit. So it was 50, then it was 45, then it was 40, 35, and some say it was 50, then 40, then 30, whatever. It was reduced down until it was reduced to 5 daily prayers, the same daily prayers that we know today. And then when he, and it's mentioned that he went down, he saw Musa again. Musa says, what did Allah give you? He says 5 daily prayers. What does Musa say? Go back to Allah. 5 daily prayers is going to be too much on your ummah. They're not going to be able to handle it. And so Prophet Muhammad, he responds and he says, I am too, I've gone back and forth too much now, that to the point where I'm not too embarrassed to go back again. So Allah Azza wa Jal, then they hear Allah's voice saying that this is my faridah, this is my obligation that I have now obligated upon everybody. It is 5 prayers, but it should be rewarded with 1 hasana as 10 hasanas. Meaning, you're going to pray 5 prayers, but you're going to get the reward of 50 prayers out of the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal. And final thing that we'll mention is that Prophet Muhammad also saw Jannah and he saw Jahannam. And he gives us a little bit of a description of what he saw in there. So it is mentioned that he was allowed to enter Jannah. Now, it's not the full, you can say, he's not entering the full version of the Jannah, okay? He's only entering like the edges, you can say, or the outsides of Jannah. And he's telling us what he saw. He says, for example, I saw domes and buildings made out of pearls, big, tall buildings made out of pearls. And I saw, the soil of the Jannah was made out of misk. It has a very nice scent to it. And it is very fertile and luscious, basically. Anything that you grow on that soil will end up growing and giving crops. And in another narration, it mentions, I walked and I saw a river that had tents made out of pearls on its banks. And so I asked Jibreel, what is this river? He said, this is the river of Al-Kawthar. So these are some of the descriptions of the Jannah that we are given from the miracle of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. And it is mentioned he also saw Jahannam, and he also met the gatekeeper of Jahannam, Malik. His name is Malik. His name is mentioned in the Quran. Malik, the gatekeeper of Jahannam, he met him. Malik was not smiling. All the other angels were smiling and excited and happy. Malik was the only one who was not smiling because he was someone who saw Jahannam, and ever since he never smiled. And so he was allowed to see the punishments of Jahannam. And so he said, I saw some people who had nails made out of copper and they were scratching their bodies and their faces with them. And Jibreel said, those are the people who used to backbite. And he said, I saw people who had noses like the noses of the camels, very big like faces, and they would eat pieces of coal, and it would come out from behind. And he said, these are the people who would steal the money of the orphan. He says, I also saw people whose bellies were very, very big and massive, and there were animals that were trampling over them. And he said, these are the people who would eat, who would use riba, interest, would deal with interest. And he said, I saw people who had a pile of fresh meat and a pile of rotten meat, and they were leaving the fresh meat and they were eating from the rotten meat. And he said, these are the people who used to do zina. So, and he said, I saw people who had scissors made out of fire, and they would cut their tongues and their lips with them. And he said, these are the people, and may Allah protect us from this one, these are the people who would sit down and teach people about how they should live their life and what they should do and what they should not do, when they themselves, they do not do what they tell others to do. They are the people who command others to do good when they don't do the good. And they tell the people to avoid sins when they themselves do the sins. So, unfortunately, this is where I have to stop. Then we'll continue the rest of the miracle, inshallah, next week, the remainder of Al-Isra and Al-Mi'raj. I do have to skip the questions just like last week, unfortunately. So I just have to skip. Anyone who has any questions, you can feel free to ask me outside the hallway, inshallah, because I do have to pack up, and because there is a class that is happening after. So the homework questions will be shared. Oh, what happened? Okay, one second, boys and girls. One second, please. Okay. I don't know what happened. This just took me to the very beginning of the lecture. So as usual, the homework questions, they will be shared with you on the group chat.